Everyone, please be seated. Thank you. It's a bit weird being up here, but I'll get used to it, I guess. So, my first proper full council meeting. Welcome to everyone. We have a few apologies for absence. Jennifer. Apologies for absence. Great. Okay, it's probably covered everyone. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you make your announcement now.
I'm wondering you may well have noticed that you're trying to get onto the website today to get papers onto the WhatsApp app, that it's not working. We have a technical issue, so you won't be able to access council papers online today. You have in front of you enough copies of the briefing note, which is the agenda, and the motions in the pack, and we also have the papers for the item of performance today's report. There are some copies of the full briefing note and some copies of the council agenda that I've got to read them, and hopefully everybody can see everything we need.
Thank you, Jennifer. And do speak up if you don't have the papers that you need. I realise it's not ideal having an IT failure, but do make sure that you have all the papers you need to make necessary decisions. We have declarations of interest now. Andrew.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Looking forward a few hours. Motions on notice. Motion D, the Liberal Democrat motion on natural capital census, urges the Council to engage with the work of the Government's Natural Capital Committee. My wife is a member of that committee. As a result, I will be taking no part in that or voting, and I will leave the chamber.
Thank you. And Anita Bradley, you wanted to say something as well.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In relation to the second motion, the City of Sanctuary, at the number 2, it encourages residents to exercise their rights in conjunction with a series of organisations, asylum, welcome, refugee resource, sanctuary hosting and advice centres. If members are volunteers of that group, they do not need to declare any interest either now or when it comes to the item.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. On a number of motions where they have issues in relation in some way or other to foreign policy, because of the secondment I'm undertaking, I'll just withdraw.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have the minutes, agenda item 3, minutes from previous council meetings. Everyone has any corrections of fact? I'll just page through the minutes from 23rd of April 2019. Nothing. 13th of May 2019. Or 17th of July. And we did have a notification, a correction of a name, which we will make. It's misspelling of a name. Otherwise, any other changes? Nope. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, appointments to committees. So, Councillor Gant, I think you have a...
Thank you. Just to confirm the change that is on the agenda on the East Area Planning Committee.
Great, thank you very much. On to announcements. I'd like to start. We've had an interesting letter from the Embassy of the Republic of Bulgaria, which I didn't know we held a polling station for the European elections for Bulgarian voters. but we did in Oxford, and they thanked us for our kind cooperation in providing the polling station. I won't read out the letter from the Indonesian embassy. So also, in terms of this is obviously my first council meeting since, proper council meeting since becoming Lord Mayor. And I've done obviously a lot since then, ably supported by the Deputy and the Sheriff, so thank you for them. On my first day, I had to meet Prince Harry, so that's a sort of right in at the deep end. And he sort of said he liked my shirt, so I consider that a win. But my impromptu speech welcoming him was in fact videoed and put on the Royal Family Twitter account, so that was also very much in at the deep end. But I won't go through the whole list of things, but just some of the notable things. As part of the D-Day commemorations and unveiled a plaque at Normandy Crescent, which is some people will be aware of that. I've obviously set up several events and attended events for my good causes, that's Asylum Welcome and Low Carbon Hub. Project Leo Launch, which many of you will hear about or know about or will hear about soon, was in the Lord Mayor's Parlour. I offered, when I started Lord Mayor, I offered to give talks on climate change to schools, and I've had a number of schools take me up on that, which has been really interesting to go around and talk to some very engaged people about climate change. There have been great youth concerts from the Bloemfontein Youth Choir visiting from South Africa. That was a very enjoyable evening. Oxford Festival of the Arts, the Interfaith Walk, and of course most recently the Freedom of the City to Benny Wender, which I know many of you were at. So that went down very well. I've had lots of grateful appreciations from people in West Papua as well as from the Free West Papua movement itself. So that's all I had to say. And rather a change from normal practice, I'd also like to ask the City Rector to say something, Anthony Buckley, who sits very patiently and quietly there through our meetings, but I feel it'd be useful to ask him to say a few words.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, very much. Thank you, everybody. 3 brief things. On a personal note, since I arrived in Oxford 6 months ago, I've been very struck by your kind encouragement and your friendship and welcome, whether it's been over the pasta through there or at various events. You, as councillors and as staff, have welcomed me very warmly. I thank you for that, and I know that that's symbolic of what the city is about. Alongside that, perhaps part of that, one of the things that attracted me to the role of being Vicar of St Michael at the North Gate in Cornmarket, contains the oldest building in Oxford, we claim, is the City Rector role. I've always been passionate about people willing to be involved in the local community. And councillors and staff here, you do it so well. And whatever your backgrounds, whatever the party, just the fact that you are committed to serving the people of this great city, I want to honour you for that. And that truly was one of the reasons why I applied for the role. It's a great privilege as City Rector to, in some very, very small way, represent all those people out there who similarly honour what you do and value what you do. So as lastly, part of that, in whatever way this may feel good for you, I'm here for you. I know it's quite tough being in politics, either nationally or locally, and just occasionally the emails mount up or whatever it may be. And if ever a coffee or a drink or a glass of water or a free tour of the tower of the oldest building in Oxford would just feel good as a change of scene, you would be very, very welcome. So thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, everybody, and I look forward to serving you wonderful people in whatever way feels good for you. Thank you.
And you're also a rather talented author as well, so very modesty. So now call upon the Sheriff. The Sheriff has any announcements?
Thanks, my Lord Mayor. Like you, I'll keep it brief. A number of events attended, including, as you mentioned, the Multi-Faith Friendship Walk, which was a particular highlight. I've also attended several nursery graduation ceremonies, which are excellent events, the very existence of which I had not even previously suspected, but they are brilliant fun. Most importantly, I'm sure colleagues will be delighted and relieved to learn that following a very successful inspection of Port Meadow about a month or so ago, the traditional match, Aunt Sally match at the Plough, Upper Wolfcote, between the Freeman team and the Sheriff's team took place, as it has done for a great many years, and I'm sure colleagues will be delighted to be aware that tradition was fully maintained in that the Freeman thoroughly beat the Sheriff's team, absolutely hands down. What a relief.
Thank you. I should have mentioned we also had the Oxford-Abingdon Bowls match, which also, true to tradition, although not as long-standing tradition as that, we lost, but with some grace, I think. Leader of the Council.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I just wish to make one announcement, which is an important announcement, and I'll go into more detail later when we're responding to some of the public addresses, because it's relevant to that. But I'd like to announce with great pleasure the creation of a migrant champion, Councillor Hosnia Jafari Marbini, and as I said, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but not in too much great detail because I am aware of the timing restrictions we have later on the agenda, but bearing in mind that not everybody for whom this is a relevant announcement might be here at this particular moment, I thought it was best to speak later. Thank you.
And congratulations, Councillor, on that new champion role. Chief Executive or Chief Finance Officer or Monitoring Officer, anything? Right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to public addresses and questions. Agenda item 6, we have none at this point. Now we move on to a series, agenda item 7, which is the main part of the business, and that is recommendations from Cabinet. Get that right, Cabinet, not Executive. And we have a number of people to speak to those recommendations. We'll obviously get to the minutes of the Cabinet later for people who have more general comments, but we have a series of recommendations to go through. And the only thing to point out is that when we get to item 10, we're going to take that out of order just before the break, because if someone does want to go into confidential session, because there's a confidential appendix on that item, it'll just be neater and cleaner if we do that before the break rather than in the middle of a business. So for item 7, I just call upon Councillor Rowley to speak to that item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try to be brief because most people here will be fully aware of the item. It has been through Scrutiny, who have made a valuable contribution. It's been to Cabinet, and now it's back to us for the bits that full Council needs to approve. This comes from government policy change, which allows us to borrow to build social housing, something that has been an objective of campaigners, including this council, for a long time. It therefore proposes some financial changes to enable us to do so and to buy most of the social housing that is to be built into the housing, from our housing company into the housing revenue account. There are, as I see it, 3 main advantages to this. Firstly, building capacity in our housing company to deliver social housing. Secondly, making it easier for tenants in that social housing to get through to the council by removing a layer of bureaucracy, although it's a very light layer of bureaucracy with the Oxford City Homes. And thirdly, in enabling us to build a greater proportion of social housing on the sites that we have available. So what the report asks us to do is to approve the increase of the HRA the Housing Revenue Account Capital Programme, so by £45.5 million, so that adequate additional budgetary provision is made for the acquisitions. To approve a revised Housing Revenue Account budget and business plan, incorporating those newly acquired dwellings, and that obviously has impacts on increasing the rent, increasing the maintenance spend, interest payments, debt redemption, etc., which is all in the Appendix 2, if you're interested. And to approve the increases to the General Fund Capital Programme in relation to increased borrowing activity of Oxford City Homes because of the rephasing of the development activity over the medium-term financial plan period. And with that, I will be quiet and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Brown. Indeed, does anyone have any questions? Okay, shall we move straight to a vote? Those in favour, please show. Well, I'll vote for it, okay. Anyone against? That's everyone, you're saying. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to agenda item 8, Councillor Turner.
Thanks so much. Something I know you're enthusiastic about. Hopefully the council will prove to be so as well. We've very effectively lent money in the past to the low carbon hub. It's a good thing to do because it helps us realise our desire to reduce Oxford's carbon footprint and also brings in interest. This continues the successful scheme and I hope council will support it.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wolfe. Any questions? Yeah. Well, go for Councillor Wade first.
I've got a question about the 2.3 million, and my question is, why wasn't this included in the annual budget back in February, March? It was already well known that Low Carbon Hub had opened up a new share offer in the summer of 2018, and they repeated this offer in January 2019, well before the budget was produced. Our amendments to the budget proposed an investment of 20k in the share offer, which was rejected. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to demonstrate the city's support for the low carbon hub, rejected out of hand without explanation. Why didn't you say at that point that this 2.3 million was already in the offing as part of the rollover arrangement with low carbon hub?
Let's take all the questions first. Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you. I've got a question that's vaguely related to that as well. I mean, clearly I'm very happy about this going forward, very pleased to second it and delighted. But I think there's a note in the report that this is basically a revenue exercise. I think it's coming out of revenue monies and stuff. And so it's just a question about capital investment as well, because we could also invest capital in the low carbon hub. There have been share issues. We've passed over the opportunity so far. I don't know whether there's another share issue coming up, but are we minded to make a capital investment at some point in the future? That's one question. The other one is just it's a bit of a technicality, but as far as I'm aware, the government's chopping of the feed-in tariff and deemed export tariff at the end of March. It's going to have quite a major impact, I think. I imagine that it affects most of the sort of schemes that Low Carbon Hub is rolling out. And if that is the case, whether we're going to need to keep an eye on the repayment terms because the return on their investments may be a bit slower.
Thank you. Any more questions for Councillor Turner? Right. The floor's yours, Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So I think there were three things there. One is why this wasn't agreed before. Certainly I wasn't aware of a request having been received by us at the time of the budget. It may have been that there were informal discussions with the head of finance before he could bring forward a recommendation, but we'll always be open to that sort of thing. So say I didn't have any contact at that time, and clearly the initiative would come from the Low Carbon Hub. In terms of the second question about... sorry, the third one was feed-in tariff. The capital, Treasury, it's a big pardon, handling it through Treasury. I think it's all meant more as a sort of Treasury investment rather than necessarily whether it's classed as capital or revenue. Understood, we've got a proportion of non-specified investments that we can use. It would be, I think, a question for our head of finance and our internal auditors to look at whether that's the right way to classify this sort of thing. Ultimately, though, I don't think it really matters very much, because it would matter if we were bumping along at the bottom of our reserves and balances, but in practice we're still making the money available, we're still bringing in the income. So in that sense, it would be more of an accounting nicety whether you would classify it differently. I don't think it would make a difference on the bottom line. Your challenge could be, are there additional opportunities that would be opened up if it was classed as Treasury? I'm not sure whether those would necessarily be with the low carbon hub, but we are looking at increasing the amount of non-specified investment that we do, and also actually we're exploring along with some other local authorities opportunities for socially and environmentally valuable investment as part of a consortium. So certainly an area we're continuing to look at. On changes to the feed-in tariff, and if the Greenest government ever decides to change rates on those, clearly we'll see. But I imagine with the low carbon hub have so far been very good and reliable payers, and I'm sure if there are any difficulties, we've been open to a dialogue. And now, given their level of establishment, this is quite well secured, so we don't have any great concerns there. But obviously, an important area to watch.
Right, thank you. I think we're moving to a vote on agenda item 8, revolving fund construction loan to the low carbon hub. Those in favour, please show. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're doing well here. Agenda item 9. So just call upon Councillor Upton to speak on OVO Energy Women's Cycle Tour.
Yep, thank you, Lord Mayor. So for the non-aficionados, the Women's Tour of Britain is an elite sporting event that runs over 6 days. It's one of the very few that gives equal prize money to women as well as men. It gets large crowds lining the route, and those are not just your traditional cycling fans either. So the deal that we've come to is with the other 4 districts and the County Council, we're going to split the funding 6 ways on this, even though, and we're going to do that over 3 years, even though in any one of those years the tour will not go through all of the districts. So it's very much a collaborative enterprise. Now, if times were good and money was flush, I think this would be worth funding as a standalone event on its own. It'll be great fun that all of the cycling groups in the city are going to go nuts over it. But money is tight at the moment, and although there are possibilities that we will get sponsorship to offset some of this cost, and I very much hope we do, I think this cannot just be about one day and a big shebang. It has to result in getting more people cycling every day afterwards, because of all the positive effects that this will have on our air quality, on people's health, and on community cohesion, actually. So I just wanted to reassure everybody that we are working on having a legacy from this as well. The county is developing a strategy in conjunction with me and their existing cycling champion. We've already got our first success, which was after the result of conversations I had on the day of the finish of the first stage that happened a few weeks ago with the leaders of Vale and South. They are appointing their own champions for cycling, and Cherwell are going to too. So I hope that that's going to result in plenty of collaboration about improving cycling infrastructure across the county and generally raising our levels of physical activity. So I commend the report to you.
Thank you very much. And do you have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Brown. Yes, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I would like to also recommend this report, and in doing so, just pick up on one aspect which I think Councillor Upton didn't mention, which is the economic benefit for Oxfordshire. I mean, certainly other places where the tour has come have seen considerable impacts on their local economy. It does bring with it a huge amount of visitors and therefore investment in the local economy. So although that may not be direct income to us as a council, it is really important investment in our local economy. So I think it's very important from that aspect too. But most importantly, I think this is about partnership working with the other councils, and it is a really good example of where we can all come together and make something bigger than our individual entities. And secondly, it's, as Louise quite rightly pointed out, this is about legacy and making sure that we use this opportunity, and everyone is very clear that that is what is going to be done, to make sure that we're encouraging more and more people to cycle every day and not just come and watch other people doing it, however good they are.
Sounds very worthy. And do we have any questions or statements? Yeah, Councillor Wade.
Lord Mayor, I'm pro-cycling, although I'm a very timid cyclist, so I'm not opposed to this in principle, but I looked at the website for OVO Energy. OVO Energy is a big gas and electricity company, and it's partnered in this by Skoda and HSBC, who are internationally well known. Why, in a time of deeper than ever cost-cutting, are we having to find £30,000 when these substantial national and international companies should be covering the costs? They support these races because it gives them credibility as charitable donors to fund events that promote healthy living. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart, they're doing it for a purpose. Also, I note that this race has already been run. It was run in June. What happens if this council refuses to foot the bill for 2019? Every one of us will have a project in their ward which would benefit hugely from £30,000. I have one now, which I don't have £30,000 for, and I'm sure we're all in the same boat. I think we should push OVO Energy and the cycle tour organisers, Sweet Spot, to actually look harder at how they raise money. And I noticed that one of the races ends at Blenheim Palace. I wonder how much Blenheim Palace is actually putting into this. I hope it's putting in more than we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or statements? No. Councillor Upton, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I take your point, Councillor Way, that big sponsors would not be our ideal partners in this. This is the model they work on. This tour costs an awful lot of money to put on. If we want them to come to us, we have to pay for it. Oxfordshire has to pay for it. Otherwise, they will go elsewhere. I think that the balance of the benefits that it brings to us outweigh the costs. But it is a balance. I appreciate that it is a balance. I don't know if Susan wants to add anything to that.
If I may, I mean, I think just to refer back to something you said earlier, Louise, which is that you were saying that they are looking for additional sponsorship, and actually part of what we're doing here is securing the tour, giving them a guarantee, if you like, and we hope, all of us, that they will raise more money in sponsorship and that we won't actually have to put in the full amount. So that is the fundamental bottom line here. And you're absolutely right. Politics is about choices. Budgeting is about choices. I think that this, on balance, is a choice that I would wish to make for the City of Oxford. We know that we are already a big cycling city, but we also know that there are opportunities to get more people cycling. We know that elsewhere this has proven to be a really successful way of getting more people interested in cycling. And one of the groups that we particularly want to get more people cycling is women. And so this does seem to be a good way of making sure that we use the benefits of bringing this tour to Oxford and Oxfordshire to encourage more people to do that.
I think we're now moving to a vote. So on OVO Energy Women's Cycle Tour, those agenda item 9, those in favour, please show. Those against? And abstentions? I'm calling for abstentions now, yep. Okay, thank you very much. That's carried, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 10, which you remember we are going to defer, and so we'll skip on to agenda item 11, so policy on Hackney carriage, quantity control unmet demand survey. So just call on Councillor Clarkson to propose that. And also say who's going to be seconding, if you know.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It should be fairly straightforward. Councils are allowed to set a limit on the number of licensed Hackney cabs they have. our current limit is 107, but we have a regular review of this to see whether there's any unmet demand within the public for taxis. We have carried that out and we've established that there is no unmet demand. So what this report does is propose that we keep our licensed taxi number as it is at the moment at 107. So the report has gone to General Purposes Licensing Committee and I would ask Council to agree the recommendations in the paper. Thank you.
Who's the seconding for that? Okay, Councillor Hayes. Any questions or statements? No, I think we'll move straight to the vote. Those in favour, agenda item 11? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 12. I think that's Councillor Clarkson again, on amendments to emission standards for Hackney carriage vehicles.
Again, this has gone to General Purposes Licensing Committee and I would recommend that Council support this.
Do we have a seconder? I saw Councillor Cook first. Any questions or statements? Councillor Wolfe.
Yeah, I thought it was a question. It's not really, it's a statement. When I look at that, I think, well, our ambition could be better, but then I realised, of course, this is setting minimum requirements. So that's kind of fair enough. And I'm aware that on occasion grant money becomes available because we just had our first electric cab, I believe. And presumably nothing of this will prevent us seizing any more grants that will enable us to do better than this minimum standard. It's just a comment.
Councillor Clarkson, do you want to respond? Or?
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I think the report is there to support the taxi trade, to enable them to purchase vehicles sooner rather than later, which are of a lower emission standard, which is to their benefit and the benefit of the whole city.
Okay, we'll move straight to a vote then. Those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That passes. On to agenda item 13, appointment of independent persons. I understand this is a bit of a technicality because they come to the end of their office, but Councillor Aziz, would you like to propose?
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to thank the officers for the work that they've done on this and to move this report. So we have a number of people who've reapplied to act on to stand on the committee, but what we'd like to do is extend the time frame for recruitment because we'd like to diversify the candidates who are coming forward. So that's basically why this is on the agenda. So I'd just like to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have a seconder? Yep, I've got a seconder there. So, yeah, so sorry, it's Councillor Lloyd-Jogbason. And we are going to move... anyone have any questions on it? I don't think it's much to question or statements. Right, so we'll move to a vote. Those in favour, please show. Okay, well, we've got a fair degree of unanimity. Item 14, which is Constitution Members' Briefing on Planning Items. I believe Councillor Linda Smith is going to... No. I thought you said your note said item 14, okay? Ah, right, okay. Well then it's Councillor Susan Brown.
Sorry, it was me. Linda passed it on my behalf because I can't get at you. So, yes, just to say that I will be moving the report. I commend this report to Council. It's very straightforward. This is quite standard in lots of different councils. We have a number of really large planning applications that are going to be coming before us. It is very sensible to allow members to have a proper briefing and an opportunity to ask questions before these items formally come to committee. That's what the proposal sets out, and I would, as I said, commend it to Council.
And do you have a seconder? Councillor Chapman. Any questions or statements? No, I think we'll move straight to a vote on agenda item 14. Those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That passes. On to item 15, and if that is you again, I think, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a report about changing the arrangements slightly for our shareholder meetings and our oversight of our various companies. Since I became leader of the council, I've been looking at the way in which we hold our companies to account and trying to make it a more transparent process. And this is an attempt to do just that. So it's bringing the companies together, because I think there's been quite a lot of confusion about which companies being looked at any one time. And this is going to set out for the year quarterly meetings so that all the companies are producing reports to those quarterly meetings based on their quarterly figures, and everyone will know when those meetings are happening. We won't be going through this process of having meetings cancelled at short notice because reports aren't ready in time. They will be happening. Scrutiny will know exactly when those meetings are happening, and I think it will make the whole process more transparent, more open, and better scrutinisable, if that's such a word. So I hope, again, that Council will support the report.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor. Lots of enthusiasm there. Councillor Smith. Any questions or statements? Yeah, Councillor Gant.
Yes, thanks very much. I'm afraid I'm going to be very finicky here. This is a relatively new departure for the council, and I've been quite clear to try and get my own head around exactly what it is we're doing, particularly in relation to exactly how the shareholder exists. And I have asked senior officers about this and had, without no disrespect to any individuals, different answers. So I do just want to make sure I'm absolutely clear myself. I think I am. But paragraph 1 of this report says, when the council created its first companies, shareholder meetings have been held at which the council as shareholder has been updated. And later in that says at the annual council, the leader indicated that the shareholder for each company would continue to comprise all members of cabinet, which is potentially slightly inconsistent. So, I mean, I think I'm pretty clear that, in fact, the shareholder is the cabinet and not the council, but I think I'd prefer it if that was made clear, especially if that is, in fact, a change from how the companies were set up at the beginning. The minutes of that council meeting of the 13th of May, which are on page 38 of our agenda today, which formally appoints the shareholders, lists the 3 companies, and then says that these shareholders are, and I quote, the whole of the cabinet acting as shareholders. And I wonder whether that shouldn't be the whole of the cabinet acting as shareholder. I wonder if we could clarify. I mean, does that just perhaps imply that the members of cabinet are individually shareholders, which I assume they are not?
I think I'd agree with your pernicketiness on that last point, but I'm happy to defer to legal advice on that. It has changed over time since I've been leader, because when I was first appointed leader, the leader was the sole shareholder of the Oxwed group, for instance, and so what I'm doing here is making the whole cabinet a shareholder for Oxwed. And I think that's a better way of holding that company to account and making sure that we have better oversight of that organisation. We're all on a learning curve here. I'm not going to pretend we're not. When we're trying every way we can to make sure that when we are meeting as the shareholder, that we are meeting in a different way. And that's another reason for doing this, is to make sure that we are meeting in a sort of more business-like forum, so that we are meeting to receive quarterly accounts and reports on those companies. And we do meet as the shareholder. Sometimes some of similar reports, or even the same reports, might come to us as cabinet for a different form of decision-making. So it's a complicated process, and we are on that learning curve. I hope we can all do it together, and I'm sure Scrutiny will help us along the way. But I do, as I said, the purpose of this is to improve the transparency of our arrangements, and I hope it will do that.
Thank you. I just have a small amendment on page 131. The date at the top that says 23rd of July should say 25th of September, so that date has changed. And also, I might ask a question. You were saying, Councillor Brown, about the changes. I thought that the leader of the council was the sole shareholder, and that was in the articles of the companies involved. Are there changes to those articles at all?
No, my understanding is that was my original understanding, which is why that was the situation for a while when I first became leader. But I understand it's at my discretion, so that is why it is now the cabinet that is the shareholder. So, and I do apologise for not having moved that amendment to the report, which you quite rightly point out on page 131 should read 25th September 2019.
Fine, we'll do that when we vote on it. So, Anita, did you want to say anything on what?
No, Lord Mayor, I think the leaders covered all the points. It's that the council chooses to exercise its shareholder and its shareholder through the cabinet.
Okay, I think everyone's hopefully clear on that now. So we're now voting on item 15, shareholder and joint venture group meeting dates. Those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That's passed. So now we're moving on to agenda item 16, which is we've gone through all the recommendations from Cabinet minutes, and there were quite a lot this time. Now we're just moving on to the Cabinet minutes themselves. If anyone has any questions, we have 15 minutes for these three sets of Cabinet meeting minutes. So I'll just page through those. Anyone have any comments or questions on Wednesday, 29th of May, Cabinet minutes? Okay, thank you. Move on to 12th of June. Yes, Councillor Tanner.
Yes, Chair. The Seacourt Park and Ride extension, could the portfolio holder or the Cabinet member let us know whether this is the Seacourt Park and Ride extension is affected by the unfortunate delay to the flood relief channel, or whether this is going ahead separately, and do we know when the work starts and finishes?
Okay, yeah, Alex.
The work starts, what month are we in now? July, should start this month. Obviously some preliminary work has already begun, and will finish, no, I'm not going to try and do it off the top of my head because you didn't give me any warning of that and I don't want to say it wrong. So it will finish on the date that's referred to in the report, to which this is the minute. On the impact of the issues around the bridge is the southern bypass bridge, as you know, and that impacts on the design of the scheme at Redbridge in particular. The Seacourt scheme and the flood scheme are always capable of proceeding simultaneously, well, successively, effectively, with some overlapping works. So there should be no impact on the Seacourt scheme. There is a larger and potentially more positive impact actually at Redbridge, where instead of having works going on for 2 or 3 different projects simultaneously, they will now happen successively, which should save money and make life easier.
Thank you. Any other questions on the minutes of 12th of June? No, thank you. We'll move on to 10th of July. Any questions on minutes from 10th of July? Yes. Sorry, Councillor Ross-Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just looking at a recommendation to the Council, the inclusion of the extra £200,000 for the Citizens' Assembly, that's going to be looking at climate change action. It's recommended to Council to include that extra 200,000 for this financial year's budget to establish the Citizens' Assembly. And it says together with associated staffing costs for reporting and research. What I'd like to know is actually who's going to undertake the monitoring and research into the outcomes of the Citizens' Assembly. I understand Camden Town Council, Camden Borough Council, had their Citizens' Assembly recently, and they have engaged a company to look at the recommendations from that Citizens' Assembly, because it's all very well having it, but we do need to have some recommendations that the city can act on. So I know that's something that's dear to your heart as well as mine. So just really a bit more information.
Yes, we have this as a separate agenda item 10, just that's been delayed later. So if you don't mind, we have a fuller discussion, I think, then that's fine. No, it's a hold that question, and maybe whoever the portfolio holder is, I guess it's Councillor Hayes or whoever, or Councillor Brown will be speaking to it later. They might want to answer that question as well. Any other questions on the minutes from 10th of July? No? Fine. Are those for noting? So thank you very much for that. And now we'll move on to questions on notice from members of the council, which is in the briefing note. Item 17. Let's find my... No. Right. Okay, I'm there now. So we have questions, responses, and we have quite a lot of questions. And this item isn't time limited. So I think we worked out if we actually went through all the questions and everyone used their full time, we would be here for 3.5 hours. So, but the Constitution has no time limit on this, so I would ask people just to be brief if they can. Obviously there are written responses, but people quite within their rights to ask supplementaries, but obviously I'd ask for some degree of restraint. So first we start from Councillor Ross Smith to Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the history. I didn't need that, Councillor Rowley particularly, because I did know about the history of it and the ministers that were involved, both Liberal and Labour. What I do want to know, actually, the only answer I really got to my question is one sentence in there. We're pulling together a communications plan to do just that. I'd like to know who the we is and whether there will be all council involvement in that communications plan, and actually, in fact, perhaps some cross-party working to see the celebration of this 70 years anniversary.
Thank you. We is, of course, the City Council, and in particular the comms team, and all councillors will be kept informed of the progress and what the plans are once they've been developed.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Landor-Mills to Councillor Rowley. Thank you. Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Clarkson again.
I do. Thank you for the reply, very much. A bit queasy about this. We have a scrutiny function for free in the City Council. It does a lot more than simply critique the Council's work. It's much more positive, proactive than that. But reading this, I find myself thinking we seem to prefer to duplicate the work of, considerable work of a tourism management review panel in this instance and spend money on external consultants, in this case to ask us what our vision for the visitor economy is. I would have thought that development of that vision was a primary function of this elected council. And I struggle to see how much value that these consultants will be able to add to the considerable work done by the cross-party panel that interviewed all the people that the consultants will want to interview again, except probably not in the context of a round-table discussion, which is, of course, what happened. So the questions are, how much will this consultancy cost, and why has it been felt necessary for them to repeat the work of the scrutiny panel?
Okay, I mean, I'd start by saying that what we're looking at is a city centre strategy, which is broader than purely tourism. And in fact, most of it is not tourism related, though obviously tourism will form an important part of it. My understanding is that we're really struggling with capacity at the moment to be able to carry this out in-house, so that is why we're using consultants.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Councillor Gant, Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you. Just a brief one. This tourism zone was something which was referred to in the report, which Councillor Wolf has just referred to. Clearly, part B of my question is about collaboration with other partners. I wonder what priorities Councillor Clarkson thinks those partners will want us to bring to those discussions.
Well, I've already had a meeting with the Chief Executive of Experience Oxfordshire to discuss this, and have said we're very, very keen to work with Experience Oxfordshire and other partners in this. I think it's clear from the tourism sector deal that local authority involvement and support is key for successful bids. So as the bid develops, we will be working closely with her on that, and depending on what the nature is, we will doing all we can to give our support.
Okay, thank you. Next was Councillor Wade to Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your reply, Councillor Clarkson. I do have a query about the amount of input we're going to be able to make into the international links. The Grade 6 post, I looked at our general fund budget proposals for this year, and it weighs in at about £23,000 a year. It's not a high-level post. So the question I've got is, how many hours we're going to be able to put into making international links work better, and whether we've asked other colleges and the university whether they're prepared to make input as well, because obviously, because these are all university cities that we're twinning with, they will expect us to be involved on some level, and that should be financial, I think, as well as social.
Well, it is, as it says, it is a full-time post, so that is dedicated to twinning. I know that with the Padua link, there is already a heavy involvement from the university, and I think also, certainly with the Perm link, there's a university involvement too. I think that's important, but I think what we have seen recently, particularly with the bond link, is the benefit to ordinary citizens of Oxford from twinning. And as Councillor Turner has said before, a huge delegation of pupils from Rose Hill went to Bonn. First time most of them had been abroad. A lot of them had never had passports before. Huge experience there. And I think what we're keen to develop is the value of twinning for people who might not otherwise have those opportunities. And while, yes, of course it's important to develop the shared links with other university cities, I don't want us to lose sight of the value that twinning has to other parts.
Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Harris to Councillor Clarkson.
Councillor Clarkson, I'm a very strong supporter of twinning, as you know, but I'm concerned about this reply for three reasons. My understanding, subject to any information you have that I don't, is that Grenoble, our twin city, is banning women, has banned women who wear burkinis from their swimming pools. Well, I strongly object to that. I'm putting a question, and Councillor Tanner has gratuitously interrupted my flow.
I do have very little power, but as Lord Mayor, one of them is to chair this meeting, so thank you. And I will intervene. I was interested in what Councillor Harris had to say.
Yeah. My question is, why does this situation, in your view, not merit a letter now? The second aspect, I tabled this question to the leader of the council, and I expected a response from the leader because it seemed to me a matter that engaged the leader, and it seems to me in a way a little unfair that it should be moved on to you with your specialist responsibility for the actual working of twinning. And the third point is that is it not right that when we twin with other cities, we are doing so in the expectation that they share our commitment to human rights, and therefore we should not let things like this simply pass unremarked?
I think that was probably 3 questions, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks. No, I mean, I quite agree with you, Councillor Harris, that the reason why we have entered into twinning arrangements is really to broaden our horizons and to strengthen links and understanding between other people, not to close those down. I've looked more into the restrictions on Grenoble, and yes, there are restrictions on burkinis, but these are part of quite a long list of restrictions which are common across France for public swimming pools, so lots of items of clothing are not permitted. So it is not singling out burkinis, I understand. I also know that Grenoble is actually a very tolerant city. It has a very strong record on being anti-racist, and it has a number of Muslim councillors. So yes, I'm happy to write, but I think we need to be fairly soft. I don't think going in heavy-handed is necessarily the appropriate way, given that it is a very, very tolerant city. The last time we wrote, actually, was when we wrote to Perm a number of years ago when Putin's government passed some discriminatory legislation against homosexuals, and we wrote to them. And although we didn't get an official letter, we did have informal discussions that actually Perm, again, is quite a tolerant city, wasn't going to enforce some of those things. So yes, it does work, but sometimes taking a fairly softly approach is better than handed, self-righteous approach. So yes, I'm happy to look at it further and possibly write.
Thank you. And just for members, General, it is about a supplementary question rather than questions. So we will be here longer than 3.5 hours if we ask questions rather than a question. So we have Councillor Cook to Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Will the portfolio holder pass on Nightlines and Samaritan's thanks to all the Town Hall and Civic Office staff who helped make the fundraising year such a success? And will you join with me in thanking Nightline and the Samaritans for all the fantastic work they do in Oxford?
Really getting grilled today, Lord Mayor. 3 things. I mean, one is there's a lesson for members here. Don't let the head of finance administer your internet banking. But on a serious note, absolutely. I think Colin's quite right to highlight the thanks that are owed here. I think also we'd thank the charities for the great work they do, and I think we'd thank Colin for his year of dedicated service to fundraising for their causes as well. Good news all round.
Colin has indeed set a high bar. So, right, Councillor Gant to Councillor Turner.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, none of us were party to any of these detailed feasibility studies about George Street, and therefore can't comment on them in detail. On the other hand, £250,000 is a lot of public money to decide not to do something. Is the councillor entirely content with all aspects of the project management and other supervision of this project?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So, a couple of thoughts. I mean, if the councillor had been in my discussion with the team when we went through this, he would have observed quite a degree of consternation. And indeed, I think it plays into some wider questions about our approach to delivering capital projects and the capital programme. One of the reports we'll come on to later notes capital programme underspend. I think having things in feasibility work being completed sets us up to fail. And so we will make some changes there anyway. That being said, when you looked at the size of the scheme that was being proposed, this is around the level of work that you would expect in order to work a scheme up. And unfortunately, there's something to be said in the maxim, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If you don't expend money seeing whether schemes can happen, then schemes can't go forward at all, and you end up not doing very much. So, and indeed, I suspect as a council overall, we would lose out if we didn't commit funds, some feasibility money to schemes that are not nailed on racing certainties. So, absolutely, I think from any project we ought to learn. We are learning in terms of the way we run our capital programme, and there are some quite significant changes coming through there. Is it a matter of regret that we spent money on feasibility work for a scheme that in the end didn't stack up anymore, when initially we thought it would stack up? Yes, that absolutely is a matter of regret. But at the same time, a fair question for Andrew to ask could be, will we never, ever, will this ever happen again? The honest truth is sometimes it might, because sometimes you will commit feasibility funds to a project that then doesn't fly.
Just to remind people, we're less than a quarter of the way through it, the questions, but so do please, again, keep things brief. Councillor Henwood to Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for the very encouraging response to no supplementary amendment.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Goddard to Councillor Upton.
Thanks, my Lord Mayor. Just very briefly, and because I'm a terrible worrier, thank you very much to Councillor Upton for her response. I simply note that the deadline appears to be the 28th of July, which is in 6 days' time. She tells us that we will be filing an expression of interest, hopefully within those 6 days. Can she reassure me?
I will email the officer responsible tomorrow morning to check she's done it, okay? Yeah.
Councillor Gant to Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you for a nice short answer, no supplementary.
Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Hollingsworth.
Just a brief one, thank you. The inspectors asked for our evidence base supporting the restrictive, their quote from their letter, carbon emissions requirements in policy RE1, that's about low carbon building, and the more restrictive requirements from 2026. I read that and I wondered how our planners might interpret that statement. How have our planners interpreted it? Do they think the inspectors are demanding proof that there is a climate emergency that warrants net zero carbon new builds? If we're going to have to answer that question of theirs, how are we approaching it?
Right. I'll try and be briefer than the original question and the original response, which had to be essays. All local plan policies have to be justified by evidence. So we have to produce evidence to justify why we are proposing a policy. The inspectors are quite within their rights to ask for further evidence if they see fit, additional evidence or evidence that expands on it. I have to say that the tone of that question with relation to policy RE1 concerns me somewhat. I think the inspector is pushing harder than I would like there in a way that concerns me. However, what we are producing is exactly the evidence that is required in the format that will enable us to make the strongest possible argument. But I do reiterate that planning policies have to have evidence to back them up. You can't just go, we want this, and not explain how you've justified it.
Thank you. Councillor Landor-Mills to Councillor Hollingsworth. Another Councillor Landor-Mills to Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Gotch to Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you. Councillor Landor-Mills to Councillor Hollingsworth. On car-free days, sorry, question 17.
No, I think no supplementary.
Councillor Landor-Mills to Councillor Hollingsworth on sustainable building materials. Councillor Henwood to Councillor Hollingsworth, community orchard at the Priory.
I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for his response. No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Sorry, I've missed out a question. Another Councillor Henwood, Councillor Hollingsworth, which is the Priory, Littlemore. enforcement. Okay. Councillor Harris to Councillor Hollingsworth, Oxford to Cowley Railway. Other Councillor Harris to Councillor Hollingsworth, Oxford to Bletchley Rail Services.
Can Councillor Hollingsworth tell me where this enabling work is visible, as I was told that work had not started on the ground? That may be wrong. If it has, where?
Along the track bed, there's a website with lots of pictures showing them going out and doing the enabling works along the track bed to Bletchley.
Thank you. Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Chapman. Councillor Landell Mills to Councillor Hayes.
Does Councillor Hayes think that we might extend our brief a little bit further and to leave it to the County Council to agree in these obvious public areas is arguably negligent?
Thanks for the question. I think I'd reiterate that this is the responsibility of the County Council. That doesn't mean that in areas where the County Council sovereign and have the primary responsibility, we won't try and step in and do things. And I think I can give a number of examples related to climate change, but I would point out that this council has seen its funding by central government hacked back over the last 9 years, and we have to be very careful about what we spend our money on.
Thank you. Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Hayes.
Yes, Lord Mayor. It's my understanding that our external auditors, Ernst & Young, are well able to help us monitor and audit our performance on our climate targets. They have climate change and sustainability services teams. So my supplementary is, who determines the brief for our external auditors, and is it not within our power to commission such work as part of an integrated audit so that the public can have assurance about our progress towards our sustainability key performance indicator?
Thank you for the question. The decision will be taken by senior officers, and they will obviously make a determination about the best use of public money.
Councillor Harris to Councillor Hayes.
I've looked at the Council's website, and it simply talks about possible measures to incentivise zero-emission vehicles. Why can't we have a low-emission requirement for lorries now, as London, Birmingham and Manchester already do? Sorry, Glasgow already do.
Thank you for the question. You asked whether there were any powers that we could take to restrict heavy good vehicles coming into Oxford City. If you look at the zero emission zone plans, you'll see that we're restricting HGVs. They're responsible for 5% of traffic movement in the city centre, and they're responsible for 17% of emissions. So we have made a change from the 2017 proposals to the 2019 proposals to be targeting those HGVs. One of the reasons we can do that is because there is a wide supply of zero-emission HGVs on the market, so we are actually taking action to tackle polluting HGVs in the city centre.
Thank you. Councillor Harris to Councillor Hayes on emissions monitoring. And Councillor Harris to Councillor Hayes on vehicle emissions.
I've looked at the study to which I was referred by the officer, and that does not appear to... I'm totally in agreement with you about the safe limit should be below the legal limit, but that's a different issue from what I asked, which is where's your evidence that there is no safe limit? What I read in the Royal College of Physicians, General Practitioners and Paediatricians report is that when you get to very low levels, you can't detect an effect. Should you not make that clear in future announcements on this subject, because there is a huge practical difference between lowering and lowering to nothing.
Thank you for your question. I think I'd respond by encouraging him to read more closely what we've been writing. So what you've asked here is about safe level for vehicle emissions. What we say is that there is no safe level for air pollution, and there are significant studies from a whole range of world-class universities which significantly show that.
Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Linda Smith. And another one on rough sleepers too, Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Linda Smith.
No supplementary on that one.
And Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Linda Smith, rough sleeper support service.
I have no supplementary, but I'd like to thank you very much for that assurance.
Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Brown, Citizens Assembly Progress.
No, I'd just comment that, of course, I tabled that question the morning that the press release was made, and I was concerned that the public were informed. So you've done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henwood to Councillor Brown, structure of the Citizens' Assembly.
No supplementary.
Councillor Gant to Councillor Brown, Citizens' Assembly expenditure.
No supplementary, thank you.
Councillor Gant to Councillor Brown, Oxford-Cambridge Expressway.
Yes, I do have a supplementary. This was a rather striking news report on the BBC that councils had been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement with Highways England, and this only became public because one of them had declined to do so. Since then, it's become apparent that the Vale of White Horse District Council has put a statement out saying that it did indeed have one of these agreements, but it was not made public. In other words, it seems to imply that the non-disclosure extends to the very existence of these agreements.
Councillor Gant, is there a question?
Yes. My question, you very clearly answered the implied question about whether this council did, but my question was a little broader, which was, can the leader give us any information about this? Who was asked, who signed, who didn't, what did it say?
I can give you as much information as is available to me, which is, and I'm very glad that Nathan's here from the Oxford Mail, because I did note that there was a quite erroneous report in the Oxford Mail today, which implied that we had signed such a non-disclosure agreement, whereas if anybody had actually bothered to contact the council, they would have found out that we had been quite public in stating that we had not been approached to sign any non-disclosure agreement, which is correct. We have not been approached to sign any such non-disclosure agreement, and therefore, although not just that, therefore, we would not have, I'm sure we wouldn't have agreed to sign such an agreement had we been approached, but clearly we haven't signed any such agreement because we have not been approached to do so. My understanding is that both the Vale of White Horse and South Oxfordshire have confirmed that their councils had been approached and had signed such agreements. I think along with Oxfordshire, but I'm kind of looking to officers to confirm that to me, as this is a supplementary question to which I wasn't given notice.
Thank you. Councillor Gant, Councillor Brown, Oxford LEP meetings.
No, thank you. You're very welcome.
Councillor Wade to Councillor Brown, impact of Brexit on service and retail sector.
A quick supplementary, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your reply. You say that officers are continuing to monitor the impacts of the UK's decision to leave the EU. I wonder if we could have a report at our next council meeting, which will be in September, I think, about what they have discovered about the situation and the effect of Brexit on employment, because we'll be a lot further ahead by then with Brexit, and we will need to know what we can be doing in Oxford.
I think I'm not sure I want to say yes straight away to that, because I think you're asking for an awful lot of work from council officers on something that, frankly, we'll be able to do very little about. We will, at that stage, possibly still not know what it is that we're facing. Now, I share, I suspect, most people, I won't say everybody in this council chamber's view, that we are facing a very, very difficult situation, not just for people in Oxford, but across the country, with the degree of uncertainty that we're facing with, particularly as we expect to find out tomorrow, our new Prime Minister, with his well-known views on this subject. But there are limits to what we can do as a City Council to help prepare. We will work with the County Council, we will work with local businesses, but none of us know what it is we're going to be facing at the moment. And all we can do is continue to support businesses in every way that we can do, which we are doing with our economic development team, and our work with the LEP. But until we know a bit more about what it is we're facing, I'm not quite sure what I'd be bringing back to you for the next council, if I'm honest. Councillor Wade.
Thank you. I hadn't anticipated a Brexit debate as one of our last questions, but Councillor Wade to Councillor Brown, final question.
It's very similar a question, Lord Mayor, on question 38. Could we have a report from the Growth Board on the effect of Brexit and what Oxford is doing to counteract it? They may be in a very different position from the officers are to give their views to this council.
I mean, it's not really, the Growth Board doesn't receive reports on Brexit. The Growth Board is there to deliver the growth deal. So if you want a report from all of the councils in Oxfordshire working together on Brexit, then I suggest that you put the question to the County Council, because the County Council are the ones that are coordinating the work on Brexit. But it is not something that would be coming to the Growth Board, because you know, that isn't where the planning lies in terms of dealing with Brexit.
That concludes the questions. Thank you very much. It took rather less than 3.5 hours, which I'm encouraged by. We're now moving back. We've just got time before the break to move to item 10. And Anita Bradley is just going to give us some advice on whether or not we have to move into private confidential session.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Members will be aware that in relation to item 10, there is an exempt appendix, but it relates only to one of the recommendations for Council. And therefore, the matter can be conducted in public up to the point that members want to discuss in any detail or ask questions about the financial information that appears and business affairs of the authority that appear in the yellow Appendix G, which will be before members. And that largely, as I've indicated, deals with financial information and information around commercial negotiations.
So hopefully people will flag up if they want to address anything that's in the yellow papers. But otherwise, I'll just ask Councillor Turner to propose agenda item 10.
Yep, thanks very much, Lord Mayor. So I think just a couple of points to highlight, I think perhaps four in all. I mean, one is the good news, which is that yet again we've delivered our budget, and let's focus on general fund revenue, our general fund revenue very effectively, including meeting our savings targets. It was really quite closer than in previous years, actually. You might say that's a good thing. I think we're getting now to a stage where really it's almost tighter than I would like on the general fund revenue, and fortunately the good news has outweighed the bad. Where we were aware of bad news, we also took the opportunity to amend future budgets. And I would just take this opportunity to thank council staff who've worked so hard to deliver services, and particularly efficiencies which were anticipated in the budget. Secondly, I would want to say something about the capital programme situation, which just briefly alluded to before. Clearly, there is a more significant amount of slippage on the capital programme, more significant underspend than in previous years. If you take out the loan to the housing company being delayed, it was very similar to previous years. And the loan to the housing company was not made, I think, for quite good reason, in that the activity was being reviewed, as we discussed earlier on in this meeting, in the light of the government's decision to lift the HRA borrowing cap. So that was, I hope, a one-off. Nonetheless, we are not as good at delivering our capital programme as we should be. What officers have been doing is working up a different approach to capital. I think there are a couple of points I would highlight there. One is that we have tended to have schemes in before we've completed all of the feasibility work, before we're clear we can push the button. And if we do that, we are setting ourselves up to fail, because, of course, the costs will change, the timescales may well change as well. And I think there's also something which in CB I sort of referred to almost as the beach towel plan, which is where officers or members wish to put down a beach towel on the sun lounger and say, this is a scheme I would like to go ahead, and I'm putting it down in the capital programme as a marker that it should then go ahead. But that then proves premature, because we're not clear, we haven't done the work to see that the scheme can actually go ahead. So you end up with schemes that are in no way oven ready being put in the capital programme, and then you underspend. And that's very unhelpful in terms of capital planning, prioritisation, also managing our investments, because you don't want money there. So so we're going to restructure capital programme, having different iterations at different stages, and crucially in the final capital programme, we won't have schemes that aren't ready to go. And future reports will be coming forward on that. There's also a very good new kind of real-time monitoring bit of kit which officers have been using. Thirdly, you'll see there are a couple of recommendations around the spending, which I would like to move. The Citizens' Assembly has been mentioned, and also works in relation to tower blocks.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Brown. Just to say, I think although the entire report's on the agenda, so people can ask questions about it, the focus is obviously on the recommendations, the rest are for noting or for questions. So, do I have any questions? Councillor Harris.
The 200,000 for the Citizens' Assembly, my understanding is that the Said Business School is the location proposed, which is is a fee being paid? If it is, wouldn't it be better to save money and have it in the town hall as a democratic exercise?
Yeah, and let me just, we have, of course, had Councillor Ross Smith's question as well, so I don't know if you wanted to reiterate that or that's already been noted, so we'll...
Lord Mayor, I have another question, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed, for what you said. You mentioned beach towels and things going down, which is an interesting picture with regard to capital programmes. You also mentioned that there's been slippage. But if you remember earlier this year in our budget discussions across the chamber here, I questioned the wisdom of why we're having an extra 5 posts for capital programme projects. And yet, I understand not all those posts from other questions I've asked in the past. All those posts haven't been filled yet. So is that one of the reasons that we haven't actually filled all 5 posts yet? Is that one of the reasons for the capital slippage?
Right. Do we have any other questions on the second part, the 200,000 for Citizens' Assembly costs? Any more questions on that?
Just the question that I was asking earlier, actually, about a breakdown of the costs.
So, Councillor Turner, do you want to respond to that?
I'll do one, then Susan will do the Citizens' Assembly ones, Craig. But no, is the fact that we haven't yet filled new posts which appeared in the budget starting in April responsible for slippage in last financial year? No, obviously not, because the posts wouldn't have come into place in last financial year. That's referring to this year's budget.
Councillor Brown.
In response to the question about Said Business School, that was one of the points of discussion at the advisory group, which your group had a member present at, Councillor Randall Mills, standing in for Councillor Gant. Officers explored a number of different venues. There are specific needs for the Citizens' Assembly in terms of the largeness of the venue and the ability to have breakout rooms. And we also had specific times that we needed to look at in terms of the dates. Obviously, it would have been great if we could have used the town hall, but unfortunately, the town hall is very popular, and it was booked up on the dates in question. So the most affordable option that was of sufficient size and suitable for the Citizens' Assembly to meet in was the Said Business School. And so that is where we made the collective decision to go ahead with that particular booking. So that was so that answers that one. In answer to your questions, was again, I think some of the issues that you're raising are still subject to some of the discussions that we're having as part of the advisory group setting up the Citizens' Assembly. Exactly how we will monitor some of the outcomes of that and what we will do with the outcomes of the Citizens' Assembly. This is all part of the work that we're still engaging in terms of the preparation for that Citizens' Assembly. You referenced also Camden Council, and it is the case that Camden Council did a very quick Citizens' Assembly. I think that in the strict speaking of those who are engaged in sort of democratic accountability of these things, it doesn't actually meet the standards of a Citizens' Assembly. So I think that one of the things that we have been very keen to do as part of our process is to take evidence not just from people who are experts on climate change, but also people who are experts in democratic accountability and the process of conducting a Citizens' Assembly. So we have been very, very pleased that we have had expertise from both those quarters as part of our advisory group.
Councillor Gant, time for a final question.
Thank you. Just picking up on one point that the leaders just said. As she says, I'm a member of the advisory group but was not present at the last meeting, so forgive me if I've got this wrong, but she said that the venue was discussed by the advisory group. But could you confirm if I'm right that actually the agreement with the venue had actually been entered into before the advisory group met, and also the contract with the consultants Ipsos Mori?
The contract with Ipsos Mori it had pre-existed, and we made it very clear from the start that that wasn't something that was going to be discussed by the advisory group. But although we had proposed the site as a school, as far as I know, the agreement hadn't been finalised until, looking at Mish and he's nodding, until the advisory group had met. So, you know, in theory, people could have decided that that wasn't the right way to go. And we did have a discussion about the dates and the venue at that advisory group, and there was nobody opposed moving ahead with those particular recommendations.
Thank you. Ed, would you like to do any summing up?
No.
So we'll just move to a vote on recommendations 1 and 2 on agenda item 10. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Abstentions? Okay. That's carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to dinner. So that's not bad, I think, for my first council meeting. And so I think we reconvene here at 7 o'clock. That's correct? Yep. Okay. Bon appetit. So we're on to item 18, which is public addresses and questions. We do have rather a lot of people wishing to speak. A couple of people have withdrawn at the last moment. But I would, again, when people are responding, when portfolio holders are responding, please be brief, because we're trying to, I really like to fit everyone in. If people make the effort to turn up to council, I think it's really important that we hear what they have to say. So if necessary, I will propose a suspension to standing orders towards the end for the extra few minutes. Hopefully, though, we'll get through everything without that. We've got a 45-minute limit. So with that, I'd like to call Raki Wayne.
Hello. Hello, my name is Raki Wayne. I'm a student at St. Gregory the Great School. I'm sure that many have come to you on the issue of climate change, but I'm here with something different. I'm here to talk about schools and our participation in the climate change crisis. Firstly, we need a climate change curriculum. We should bring awareness to the fact that civilization as we know it may perish. To those who will affect the most, our generation. We should be able to benefit our future without sacrificing our education. We ask you to contact Ofsted to ask for an education of what may wipe us out if we don't act now. With the climate change curriculum, we can introduce ways that both students and parents can reduce our carbon emissions. Most importantly, we need to address the fact that schools across Oxford want to say in upcoming discussions concerning proposals in becoming carbon neutral. We are leading in a developing student summit held at St. Gregory's and other schools. We will record our thoughts and will submit them to the Citizens' Assembly because we demand a say in our future. Lastly, please support the motion to avoid penalising those who are protesting, those who know that there is no use in studying for a future we will never have. We want your help as city councillors to lobby your MPs to introduce a new curriculum, support the Student Summit, and overall letting us rewrite our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us here. And we have a response from Cabinet Member for Zero Carbon Oxford, Councillor Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On behalf of the City Council, I want to thank you for calling for more thorough teaching of climate change in school. As you highlight, we're facing a climate catastrophe and we must ensure that the young people who will live far into this future are equipped with the knowledge needed to fight, mitigate and hopefully avoid such a catastrophe. This council takes climate change very seriously, and that's why we posted on Friday a letter, which I'll give to you, to the Secretary of State for Education to ask for a review of the national curriculum and the inclusion of education on climate change. We've also contacted the 2 MPs in Oxford to ask for their support, and as soon as we get a response from their offices, we'll be sure to send them over to you. We all have a role to play in combating climate change, and we must all do what we can to raise awareness of this important issue. That's why your council strives to take an active role in tackling climate change. We've supported the climate strikes in the city, which I know many of your school students, your fellow students, have joined. We've supported the petition signed and started by a group of Cheney School pupils calling for compulsory lessons on climate change, and they came here at last council to talk about that petition. And on Clean Air Day, we worked with primary school students to bring the important message of the impact of air pollution and the harmful health impacts that it has to our streets. And we also had recently an electric vehicle summit where we made sure that on the screen, as the City Council introduced the summit, we had the face of Oxford's very own Greta, a schoolgirl who was tackling air pollution called Greta. And we made sure that all of the key industry figures in that room saw her face, heard her message, and over the next 2 days developed policies and plans which took in line her values. As you highlight, the City Council will be running this country's first true Citizens' Assembly on climate change in September and October. The purpose of this is to collect a representation of the city's viewpoints so that we can develop a zero carbon strategy as quickly as possible, but also one that has the democratic consent of the city. And one of the reasons we set up the Citizens' Assembly was to make sure that politicians weren't going into the same rooms and see the same faces talking about the same issues, because we've seen over the last 40 years that hasn't worked. So what's been particularly pleasing over the last year has been to be going into those rooms and seeing new faces. And they're mainly young faces. They're the people who've got the most radical ideas, they're the ones bringing the energy to the meeting, and we've got a lot to learn from that. Hearing from our younger generation through the Assembly will be massively important to us. We're committed to having the voice of children and young people heard at the Assembly, and exactly as you say, all of us in this room are going to face our climate future, but it's your generation who will especially face it, so we have a duty to listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now call on Noor Abdo. Thank you. If you'd like to address council.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Nuha Abdo. I am the founder and coordinator of the Syrian Sister Community Group. I come to Oxford from Syria in 2016, and I am here today to talk to you about the Syrian community in Oxford and our experience of resettling here. As you many know, Oxford has taken more than 14 families through the Syrian Vulnerable Person Resettlement Program. This is a government-funded program that has brought 20,000 people to the UK from the refugee camps in countries around Syria. Families come to Oxford from Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey. Others have made their own way here, and together we are a community of approximately 300 people. Oxford is an amazing, welcoming and friendly city, and without expecting, the Syrian family who have come here have felt welcome and safe. We are happy to see our children in school, and we are trying hard to learn English, and we all want to get jobs to support our families. In a recently study of the resettlement of the Syrian community in Oxford by the Refugee Study Center, the overwhelming response from participants was that they felt safe and welcome and happy to be here. I welcome the initiatives in the motion before you today, especially the practical help offering to refugees, but resettlement in a new country is a long progress for refugees, and there are always difficulties along the way. Finding your place in new country when you don't speak their language, rebuilding your life when you don't have work and helping your children plan for their future, when you don't have full understanding your new environment, are all challenging. I would like to talk about one of these difficulties and one of the things that helps. Learning a new language as an adult is not easy, as some of you may know. Learning a new language with a new script when you may or may not have been able to read and writing in your own language is considerably hard. In 2017, the government allocated 10 million to support the refugee arriving on the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme and issue guidance that should in a part be used to ensure that all refugees receive a minimum of 8 hours English language and teaching per week starting within a month of arriving. Whilst most of the Syrians arriving in Oxford are attending English class, mainly in MBS in Cowley or the City of Oxford College, I know of none who are receiving 8 hours a week. Most get 4 hours, a few get 7. Those with young children and babies get none. Nowhere offers language learning and childcare. A recent report by Refugee Action has highlighted the shortfall in language provision for refugees, and we recently feel the effect of this in our community. Without enough English, our daily lives are difficult. We might be able to navigate the bus system after a bit of practice, but when a letter arrives from the council or when we receive an email from the tax office, we are stuck. Looking for work is obviously difficult, and lack of language is the best barrier to getting employment for most of our community. Worse still, when we need medical help, have to go for hospital treatment, or need to call an ambulance, we are really in trouble. One lady in our community gave birth alone in her bathroom because she was unable to call an ambulance when she went into sudden labor last year. The consequences of the not receiving enough English language lessons are really serious, and I would urge the council to prioritize this in making Oxford a really city of sanctuary.
Yeah, sorry, you've got only a few seconds left, so if you can conclude. Thank you. So what to help organizations? A lot of organizations are helping Syrian community for daily life, for council and school and unemployed. But without this service, we would really be struggling with the practicing of resettlement. But rebuilding our lives is also involves rebuilding our relationship and building a new friendship and making new connection. And here it is our communities that we depend on most. My group is a Syrian sister enable women in our community to meet each week, and we share our difficulties and success, and we share advice and suggestions, and we provide each other emotion supporting through what sometimes difficult time. Yeah, sorry, you've run out of time now.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Very sorry, we have to be strict on time. We have so many people wanting to speak. We have a response from Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you very much for your address, which we have all read as well. So don't worry, we have read all of your words. Anything that you weren't able to say today, first, can I commend you on your English, which is fantastic.
Thank you very much.
So obviously the lessons are working somewhat. But thank you for raising some very serious issues, which we will, of course, take away and have a look at. My colleague, Councillor Linda Smith, was just reminding me that when we had children's centres across the city, there was childcare provided to allow people to have English language classes, and it's one of the short-sighted aspects of government policy, that they will give money with one hand which is short-term and not actually able to be used properly because they don't actually think about how it can be used, and they don't allow local communities to actually develop the services properly for people. But we will take all of that away. I said earlier on in the council meeting that I was making Councillor Jafari Marbini our migrant champion, so that she can work with officers to continue the good work the city is already doing to try and support migrants of all different kinds in the city to settle in and feel welcome and to learn English and be part of our community and add to the vibrancy of our city. I know that I'm conscious of the time, so Lord Mayor will slap me down in a minute. So I will leave Hosnia to talk a bit more, as I know she will when we come to the motions that we're going to be discussing later, about why she in particular is a very good person to be doing that particular piece of work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We now have Nabila Talib and Adam Khan. Welcome. You have 5 minutes between the two of you to address council.
Right, perfect. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Khan. I'm from Afghanistan. I came to Oxford in 2007 at the age of 12 as an asylum seeker. I was passed on to Oxfordshire Social Services, and through them, I was given to a foster family. The kind of support I got from social services, they have put me in Oxford school, give me all the support I needed. They used to come every 3 to 6 months to check on me, how I was progressing, and help me with anything that was needed. I was also supported by the organization Children's Society, which has a shutdown now. They helped me with my education. They were always there for me whenever I needed them. And they used to hold social activities every week to bring everyone together. I had the privilege that I was given to such a wonderful foster family where they supported me with everything, helped me grow as a person, looked after me, and pushed me to achieve my best in life. After a lot of struggle, I was given refugee status. And now I'm on my way getting British citizenship. I work in London, and I feel settled in this country like I belong. This would have not been possible if it wasn't for the support I got from Oxford. As we can see nowadays, some youngsters don't have the support they need. They struggle to find yacht clubs and other groups to keep them engaged, and they end up taking the wrong path, getting involved in drugs and other crimes. They might also suffer from mental distress because being in the asylum system without any support can be a very difficult experience. And I think it's very important to have a mentor, and that mentor could be a foster family, a teacher, a yacht club worker, anyone that can guide you to the right path, support you, and push you to achieve good in life. I'm sure you all see the benefit of making Oxford a welcoming city for asylum seeker and refugee, and I hope that we can work together to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nabila. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nabila Talib. So my family started fostering when I was in year 9. And Adam was the first child that came to our house and absolutely transformed our lives. Of course, we didn't know this was going to happen when we first started out. I got the opportunity to learn whilst growing up with Adam about the struggles of navigating the asylum system as a child, going through adolescence whilst being in limbo and not being able to be excited about your future as other young people were, because your status in this country had not been approved yet. He grew resilient, and I've always admired his ability to be positive through the toughest of times. Interacting with social workers, refugee support workers, education professionals, all through Adam gave me a unique outlook into the world of an unaccompanied asylum-seeking child. It made me more curious about the refugee rights and ultimately led me to study social work, qualify, and now teach at Oxford Brookes University as a lecturer in social work. The work that many organisations in Oxford, like Asylum Welcome, Refugee Resource, Oxfordshire County Council, do never fails to amaze me when I compare our small but mighty city with others across the country. I've done work and research within immigration detention and the area of work with people who have no recourse to public funds. I've seen the immense amount of struggle and distress that people face in a system that fails to provide for them on the basis of their immigration status. As a country, we uphold values of social justice, equality, and inclusivity, yet we continue to detain people indefinitely. We have welcomed the shutting down of Campsfield House, and I hope that we continue to push for the end of indefinite detention altogether. Oxford committing to becoming a city of sanctuary for asylum seekers and refugees shows our commitment to upholding human rights and social justice for all. Adam being welcomed into Oxford not only had an impact on his life, but also inspired my own life trajectory and would in turn have an effect on the lives of the people I teach and work with. So we are therefore a good example of how the simple act of receiving the support of a city can create the ripples of transforming entire communities for the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so Councillor Brown was going to respond.
Thank you. Very simply, thank you for your very inspiring and transformative story. I think everyone here will have learned from you today, and that's exactly, I think, the message that you hoped to bring to us. So later on the agenda, when we are reaching our motions, which there are several actually, I think, today, which are of relevance to you, I hope you may stay and listen to that debate. And you may have heard the answer I gave to the previous person coming in about the fact that we have today created a migrant champion in our council, who I think will continue some of the good work that you've described very eloquently in your speeches. So thank you both very much. Thank you both for the huge contribution you're already making to our city, and thank you for taking the trouble to come and talk to us here today.
Thank you. So I'm told that our next speaker, who had a question, Sue Brough, is unable to make it, but we have what she would have said and the written response in your papers. So now we'll move to question 5, Geoffrey Sanford, Oxford Men's Group. So we have no Geoffrey Sanford either, but we don't have a written response. Maybe Council.
So Sarah won't be doing her address, and Geoffrey doesn't appear to be here, so next up is Artwell.
All right, okay, so maybe Councillor Brown, you could circulate your response to the question from... there is it on a... It's not on my papers, but... Okay, well, maybe it's somewhere. Okay, and also we have a question from Sarah Laysby in response. Now we move on to Alistair Morris, also is not here. And so we'll move on to question 8, which is Artwell.
Hello. This is a very important case I want to reiterate to you all today. 2 weeks ago, the Court of Appeal heard the case of a student at Sheffield University who was expelled from his course for sharing on social media his thoughts about homosexuality. He went to the High Court and lost. He then took his case to the Court of Appeal 2 weeks ago and won. And the reason I'm here now is because the decision that the court said should cheer everybody who believes in the English tradition for free speech, controversial speaks, for sharing your views on social media without being punished. Because that is exactly what the Court of Appeal said. This young student should not, as an English man or woman, be punished for having a religious or political view and for sharing it on social media. It should not be used by Sheffield University to punish him, because we all have an 800-year tradition, and Oxford is exemplary of that, for free speech. Now,
although you are deviating a bit from your speech.
All right.
Here.
So I'm saying that because 3 weeks ago, the Executive for Communities banned the speaker for Oxford's Men's Group from speaking. And it seems to me that that is not even in compliance with the law. So I'm basically asking you today to, because so much public space now is controlled by the City Council, it's imperative that we do not live in a city where the City Council, all officers, all councillors for that matter, can decide who speaks and who does not. So I'm asking two things. I'm asking the City Council to apologise to Oxford Men's Group for banning at such short notice their speaker. I'm also asking this council to adopt a constitution that forbids it, whether that be elected officers or executive officers, from censoring perhaps the most important thing we in England have and we should all cherish. And that's our ability to have your opinion, to share your opinion without being censored. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, you provided a written response. Do you wish to add anything?
No, Lord Mayor, but I would like to read out my written response.
Okay.
Thank you. So, cancelling the event booking for the talk Dr. Gomez planned to give did not breach his freedom of expression. We did not ban him from expressing his views. The right to freedom of expression does not mean someone has to be able to express their views in one of our buildings, and we are not obliged to provide a platform for this to take place. The right to freedom of expression does not mean people can fail to respect other people's rights. Oxford City Council members have consistently voted to stand up for those groups with protected characteristics, be that to do with sex, gender reassignment, religious belief, or any other characteristics protected by legislation. We apply those values within our event booking terms and conditions. When we investigated complaints about the talk Dr. Gomez proposed to give, feminism was women's great enemy until transgenderism came along, we considered that the rights and freedoms of women and LGBTQIA+ people would not be protected if it went ahead. We agreed that the talk would breach Section 5.3 of our booking terms and conditions for this reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We now have a question from Artwell. You have 3 minutes for questions.
I'll be brief. The councillor for Rose Hill was very verbose in January this year in support of a lady who claimed that she was the subject of abuse based on her heritage, Pakistani, and her religion. The driver of the inspector on the bus of whom was accused was summarily had a tribunal in April the 29th of this month, and he was completely exonerated. The reason I'm bringing this up is that with the City Council promoting this idea of hate, we're having more and more false allegations that I believe are completely politically malicious. And I'm asking the council once again to apologise to that driver, to that inspector, because these incidences, more often than not, turn out to be fabricated. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor is named if she wishes to respond. Yep. And then I'll come to you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Every day we are seeing red lines being crossed with racism being channeled by the most powerful politician in the world, Donald Trump. Last week he attacked congresswomen of colour precisely because of their race, their gender, and in the case of Ilhan Omar, because she's a visible Muslim woman who wears a hijab, is black, and because she's a former refugee. Here in the UK, we are likely to see a man who sees fit to call Muslim women who wear the niqab bank robbers and letterboxes. A man who has referred to black people as pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. A man who has made homophobic statements. This man is possibly hours away from becoming the next Prime Minister of the UK, a bitterly divided country where open racism and bigotry is thriving in ways we have not seen in decades. We have seen an increase in racism in this very city, and this is the context in which this speaker has chosen to come here and make allegations against an older Muslim woman who alleges she's a victim of racism and who is not here to defend herself. It's against this background that the speaker has chosen to come here and make allegations against me, a visible Muslim woman, a national equalities and anti-racism campaigner, and an elected councillor, because I refuse to not show solidarity with those who say they're victims of racism and those looking to address racism and all forms of bigotry. The Speaker has chosen to deliberately conflate a number of issues to try and derail the vital work that is needed to eradicate racism and to bring people and communities together. His address here is a distraction from the work that needs to be done. I will finish up by inviting the Speaker to work with me and indeed all members of this Council on implementing proactive anti-racism work in Oxford. We would love to have you join our work. We hope you will. I will also finish up by reading the words of African-American writer Toni Morrison, who eloquently describes the actual function of racism. She says, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language, and so you spend 20 years proving to them that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Someone says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says that you have no kingdoms, and so you dredge that up. None of that is necessary. There will always be one more thing. I would also just like to say thank you to the speakers who've spoken today. I think they are the true face of Oxford, and it's wonderful to see the representation in this chamber. And one more time, I call on the Speaker to work collectively with everyone in this chamber to ensure that we eradicate racism in all its forms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to give Councillor Brown the opportunity to say something.
I don't think I need to add anything to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have now an address from Judith Hartley. Judith Hartley, sorry, I said Hartley. Judith Hartley.
Lord Mayor, councillors, the main points of my address today are about the City Council's change of policy in appointing charity trustees, the absence of any documentary evidence supporting any decisions around this change, and the responsibilities of council-nominated trustees in general. It is not about any one specific charity, as Councillor Brown infers in her reply. Indeed, I mention no charity by name. And I quite agree with Councillor Brown that we have already had the debate that she mentions via Cabinet and further correspondence, but that is not the issue I'm addressing. Last month, I had cause to address the Cabinet about the City Council's appointments to outside bodies, in particular their appointments of charity trustees. In response to that address, Councillor Brown explained that the Council's policy was now that all appointments to these bodies are filled by elected councillors to fulfil the role as a contact between the body and the Council. Following the Cabinet meeting, I inquired of Council officers as to when this policy decision was taken and where I might find reference to the documentary evidence for this. Officers replied that this is not a formal policy position. It is rather the approach that the Council has taken over the last few years in order to promote stronger links between the outside body and the Council. I would have expected that such a change of approach must have been discussed and the approach formally decided and documented somewhere and sent for authorisation to the Charity Commission. But further inquiry to officers prompted the reply, I don't believe that this is supported by any documentary evidence other than the annual lists of individual appointments which Cabinet approves in May or June each year. There are several things wrong with this. First, the role of a trustee is not to act as a contact or promote stronger links between the outside body and the Council, but to run the charity. Second, charity trustees are answerable to the Charity Commission before they are answerable to the City Council, and their appointments are governed by Charity Commission regulations. Third, has the City Council notified the Charity Commission of their change of policy in appointing charity trustees? The Charity Commission's guidance for trustees states that all trustees, regardless of how they are appointed, must act solely in the interests of the charity. It's not their role to act on behalf of any particular group. And when running your charity, you must carry out your charity's purposes for the public benefit. Some councillors nominated as trustees by the council are most conscientious and attend meetings on a regular basis. Others are less so, and some do not attend a single meeting during their appointment as a trustee. Even conscientious trustees have commented to me recently that, as council appointees, they weren't proper trustees. Oh yes, you are. I would respectfully remind all councillors who have been appointed by trustees by the City Council that you are proper trustees with an important role to undertake for the charity to which you have been appointed, whichever charity that is, and that your attendance and input at meetings are not optional. Your obligations to that charity are over and above and separate and distinct from your obligations to the council. I would also respectfully ask the council to consider its position with their appointment policy and to consider and comply with Charity Commission requirements when making such policy changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have a response from Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As you referenced, Judith, we have already had this debate via correspondence and you've already raised this at Cabinet. So I know you haven't today directly raised the issue of Elder Stubbs charity, but I think we have satisfactorily dealt with that and I have referred to it in my written response to you. Provided that the requirements that the City Council has to nominate trustees has been fulfilled, then I don't really see that it is an issue for the receiving body to query who it is that this body has chosen to actually nominate. All councillors who volunteer to serve as trustees are made aware of their responsibilities to charity to which they have been appointed. As someone who has served as a charity trustee nominated by this council for 20 years, I can tell you that my use to that charity was far greater in the period when I was a sitting councillor and had contacts within the council and was able to help push them in the right place to get people contacts so that they could help people more effectively than in the short period that I was a trustee for that charity when I was not on the council. And that is what we are trying to make sure that we are doing, is giving support to all the organisations to which we make nominations. It is totally open, as it is to the charity that I sit on, has trustees that are appointed from other bodies, and that is absolutely open to any charity to take in trustees from elsewhere. But if people are coming to the City Council for trustees, I think that's because they expect to see City Councillors made those trustees. So thank you for raising this again. I think we have probably been around the houses on this one about as far as we can go, and we will not be changing our approach.
Thank you. We now have another question from Judith Harley. Just to remind you, it's rather a lot written here, that you have 3 minutes for a question.
Lord Mayor, councillors, given the recent remarkable triumph of England's cricket team and the growing interest in women's outdoor sports, priority should be to encourage everyone, especially children, to embrace fitness and outside activity. Statistics show that these days, fewer children take physical exercise, and physical exercise is proven to be good for both physical and mental well-being. Almost 2 years ago, on behalf of Temple Cowley residents, I asked you to make a compulsory purchase of the William Morris Sports Ground and return it to public use. We believe that there is a compelling case to do this in the public interest, and such a move will promote social and environmental well-being. When I made my original request, you replied that you are not expanding your property portfolio. 2 years on, the site is still boarded, and I am asking you to reconsider and bring this site back into beneficial public use. Since 2012, this space has been subject to numerous housing planning applications, all of which have been opposed by residents and refused by the City Council because the site is protected open space. Planning appeals against these refusals have been dismissed for the same reason. The City Council has supported residents in all these cases. At present, yet another planning application awaits consideration. We know that the draft Local Plan 2036 suggests either housing or leisure for this site, but residents and the Residents' Association oppose this and argue that this site should remain as protected open space allocated for leisure only. It is not too late for the Council to change their designation of this. It is high time to break this deadlock and return the site to its original use. This is not a redundant field and car park, as the owner indicates. It would still be available for sport and recreation had the owner not fenced it off and rendered it publicly unusable. We appreciate this open space within our relatively densely developed area. It adjoins a primary school, and their children, as well as residents, would benefit from this open, safeguarded sports area. Who knows what future sports champions might be nurtured here? Councillors, I am again asking you to make a compulsory purchase of the William Morris Sports Ground, to restore it as a public sports facility to promote social and environmental well-being. Without planning permission, this site should be valued as allotments or agricultural land, as was Barton Park, at around £12,000 to £15,000 per acre, which is quite affordable for the City Council.
Just running low on time now.
If this site is developed, its sports potential will be gone forever. Will you safeguard this sports space for future generations by making a compulsory purchase order on this site? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a written response from Councillor Turner. Did you wish to read that out or say anything additional?
I can read it out. It's quite short, Lord Mayor. I'm afraid the Council's position does remain unchanged from the previous response, and there are no plans to compulsorily purchase the land at William Morris Close. The law around compulsory purchase is such that the City Council would stand little prospect of success, and funds are not available to support such a process.
Thank you. We've done very well on time, and in fact, we've had a speaker turn up, Geoffrey Sanford, who obviously we're not obliged to hear him speak because he's turned up late, but I think given we're accused wrongly, I think, of stifling freedom of speech, I think it'd be right to show some generosity and allow him to speak. So if you could please bring in Geoffrey Sanford. Please address Council.
Thank you. Why has the Head of Community Services, who is part of the City Council's senior management team, failed to respond to our earlier letter of complaint in respect of the unlawful banning of an Oxford Men's Group public lecture?
Thank you for that question, brief and to the point. And we have a written response from Councillor Brown. Do you wish to say anything more?
Yes, firstly, it was not unlawful, and so I would ask you to withdraw that. But secondly, unfortunately, there was a delay with our mail system, so that the Head of Community Services only recently received the letter that you posted. I am aware that a reply has now been sent out, so I hope you have received it. I apologise for the delay in responding. I don't know whether you were here earlier when we addressed the substantive issue that you were raising, but we have given a pretty comprehensive response to that. If you haven't heard it, then I refer you to the order paper because it is in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thanks. We actually just about managed it within the time limit, so thank you very much for everyone's support. Now we're moving on to item 19, agenda item on page 155, outside organisations, chair reports, and I believe Councillor Chapman is going to speak to this item.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I commend this report to the Council and all those in it. It looks back over the previous year of the Safer Communities Partnership, 2018-19, and also is very clear about a number of key priorities for 1920, which actually are very germane to today's discussions in this chamber. If you notice, one of them involves a more extensive set of initiatives around hate crime, tackling the issue of modern slavery, throwing our weight behind violence against women and girls, the strategy to stop it wherever we can. So this is a thoughtful report that also shows, in my eyes, the legacy that I've been left by Councillor Hayes, for which I'm very grateful. There's obviously a lot of initiatives that have been put in place to tackle these issues. And also, it speaks to me of the value of partnership, because you can't tackle these really complicated issues without partnership. And this is a complicated partnership, but I know from my conversations with the police and other players that the team who do the Safer Communities work in the City Council are highly regarded, doing extremely good work, and should be commended. So it's on that basis that this report is tabled for the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. We have the opportunity to ask questions if anyone has any questions they wish to ask. Otherwise, the report is for noting. Does anyone have any questions to ask Councillor Chapman? Yes, Councillor Rod Smith.
Just a quick question, if I could. I couldn't see anywhere in the report any reference to the partnership the City Council has with Oxford Street Pastors. Is that just a vision?
Well, I don't think the report is an entirely comprehensive list of all the partnerships we have. I'm happy to get back to the member with information about that. You're right, it doesn't mention it specifically by name, but it doesn't mean it's not going on. So I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Otherwise, I believe the report's just for noting, so thank you. And we'll move on to scrutiny report, agenda item 20, page 159, Councillor Gant.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. First thing to say probably is to note the contribution to scrutiny in this council of our outgone officer, Stephen Robinson, who served this council with enormous distinction for almost 2 years and has moved on to higher things. So I'd just like to record my thanks for all his support and to welcome his successor, Tom Hudson, who's been appointed but not yet taken up his post. We look forward to working with him. That means that after a little more than 3 years in this post, I've now had 3 scrutiny officers and 4 vice chairs. So I'm trying not to take it personally. There's no report as such in your agenda today, and there are references to the work of scrutiny sort of dotted throughout the papers. So I'll just pick out 2 or 3 if I may. The housing panel actually put a report to Cabinet, which picked up on a recommendation it made some time ago around safeguarding in guest houses, and it's on page 144 of the main agenda pack if members are interested in that. Clearly an important issue which I wanted to make sure that members were aware of the fact that the scrutiny function had made recommendations on that and where they had got to. There has been, as Councillor Wolfe and others have referred to, a scrutiny review into tourism, which I had the honour of chairing. The responses to that are in the recommendation tracker at the back of your agenda pack. I have to say, speaking as chair of that review, I was disappointed in the response from the City Executive Board. Sorry, it's not called that anymore, is it? The Cabinet. Recommendation 1 was about developing a vision. I thought that was a nice, easy one. Let's go for yes, but the answer was no. We recommended, after a considerable amount of work and investigation and comparison with other cities, that this authority undertake a survey of coach operators based on an excellent one which exists in Cambridge. The response, rather to my astonishment, was that we already know what the issues are with coaches, which slightly makes a bit of a mockery of our 3 months of work. It was characterised as being pro-coach, which it is not. There were other elements in there which Councillor Wolfe referred to in his written question. Moving on, the work plan is in your agenda paper. We will, in September, be calling for topics for review groups. As soon as our new officer is in place, we'll be putting him to work. So I would please encourage all members to identify subjects that they think would benefit from that degree of detailed scrutiny. And there is also a recommendation tracker. Andrew Brown tells me, he counted, I didn't, that in the last council year, 80% of scrutiny's recommendations were accepted. It's sometimes said that the measure of scrutiny's effectiveness is how many of its recommendations are accepted. I slightly take the view that it's part of our job to push Cabinet further than it might want to go, and actually a healthy percentage of recommendations that is not accepted is not a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And obviously we have a sort of not the normal form of report in front of us, and I guess that's because of Stefan's lack of resources. But take that into account when you're asking questions. So it's now open for questions to Councillor Gant. I have a question, which is obviously we've declared a climate emergency, and one of the ideas being put forward for working groups is a climate emergency working group, and that seems to have been delayed. So I'm just, along with any other working groups because of the lack of resources, I'm just wondering when you think those working groups might start and what impact that will have on the programme for the coming year.
Sure. Well, thanks, Craig. As you know, the committee agreed to basically park selecting topics while we didn't have a scrutiny officer in place, and therefore that will be done early in his tenure, in other words, at our next meeting in September. So do please, bring that forward.
Right, thank you very much. If there's no more questions, we'll just note that report. Thank you very much. So now we move on to agenda item 21, which is motions on notice. So people would like to look at those motions. We have two cross-party motions, and we were having a discussion about the need to sort of more accurately reflect the need, the cross-party motions, desire for cross-party motions, which I think are to be encouraged, but our constitution is silent on them, so we've had sort of custom and practice around that. And I think this time we have two cross-party motions, which three parties have agreed to. And what I'd like to try to encourage you to do is to have one speaker, one proposer, and then a seconder, a thirder, and then the proposer responding. I accept that there may be more than that want to speak, but obviously we have other motions to discuss, and which are party motions, and so what we don't want to see is too many cross-party motions pushing those party motions down the agenda. So we'll start with motion 21A, emergency motion on Sudan, end the killings and human rights violations, and that's for Councillor Aziz to propose.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This council supports the cause of Oxford Sudanese community to hold the Transitional Military Council to account over the killings and abuses of protesters. And I'd also like to thank members of our Sudanese community for joining us here this evening. And I know how painful this is for you and how fearful you are for your family and relatives. So thank you for being here. Since the fall of Umar al-Bashir on the 11th of April 2019, Sudan's transition to democratic civilian authority rule has been violently quashed and met by human rights violations carried out by the military authorities compromising of the Transitional Military Council. Rights violations include using rape and sexual abuse as a political weapon, enforced disappearances and imprisonment of protesters, the use of live ammunition and torture against unarmed protesters, and attacks on hospitals and health facilities to further target the injured. Since December 2018, a mass peaceful protest uniting citizens across class and regional lines over the cost of living has developed into a representative protest movement calling for peaceful, democratic change, supported by Sudan's independent trade unions, professional associations, and opposition political parties. Doctors, teachers, lawyers, journalists, students, and workers are among people who have taken strike action and joined the democracy movement. Many of these individuals are related to or are friends of Oxford residents of Sudanese heritage or Sudanese people who are residents of Oxford. This council acknowledges the brave and principled work of Oxford's Sudanese community and wider diaspora to push for accountability over the many decades of human rights violations and crimes against the Sudanese people by the regime. This council believes the people of Sudan have the right to protest and organise without fear of violence and abuse. This council condemns the British government for being complicit in the violence through its cooperation with the Saudi campaign in Yemen, where Sudanese militias are deployed, and through funding Sudanese militias indirectly through EU border policies, the Khartoum Protests Rome Declaration 2014. This council acknowledges and thanks Annalisa Dodds MP and Leila Moran MP for demanding the UK government applies pressure on the Sudanese authorities to end the killings and abuses and ensure there is a democratic transition of power. In support of the local Sudanese community, this council asks the leader of the council to write to the relevant UK government ministers in the Home Office and Foreign Office and to the city's MPs asking that the UK government is condemned for the use of violence, rape and sexual violence against protesters, cease all forms of security cooperation with the TMC. So all the other recommendations are listed here. I know I'm out of time, but I'd like to once again thank members of Oxford Sudanese community for all their brave work and for being here this evening as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm looking for a seconder from Lib Dems, and I think Councillor Harris.
Yes, I move to second this motion. I endorse everything that Councillor Aziz has said, and indeed the nature of this massacre has not been fully appreciated in the media reporting here. Over 100 people murdered, something in the region of 70 raped, many bodies thrown into the Nile, quite a number of those murdered, shot or stabbed in hospital, and among the bodies brought out of the Nile, those of a number of decent soldiers in the units concerned who tried to protect the civilians and were themselves murdered. It is an aspect of a terrible problem in the world that if one of us murders someone, we're a murderer, and we're a very wicked criminal. If we murder two people, we're an exceptionally wicked criminal. But someone who orders troops to shoot down hundreds of people is very often then a head of state treated with respect and deference. Most of us will remember the Tiananmen Square massacre in Beijing. Uzbekistan and Myanmar are also places where the government bases its power on a massacre of this kind. This is something which everyone who cares about freedom and decency in the world must unite to oppose. So I urge us all to pass this motion. What Oxford does is listened to in the world. We are not simply any local authority, and if the motion does pass, I would ask the administration to seriously consider sending its contents to the cities around the world with which we are twinned. Thank you very much.
I'd just very much like from the Chair to offer the support of the Greens, and thank you very much, Shaista, for putting this motion to Council, and I think the fact that it's got cross-party support shows the seriousness with which we take it. I can't claim to be an expert in Sudan, but I've read up about it and I understand the situation there. It's a power struggle between the militia and the pro-democracy movements, and I think the pro-democracy movement in particular has lots of links within the UK and with Oxford, and I can see that they're strong because of the professional nature of a lot of those people. I'm particularly encouraged that women are playing a very vital role in that and a very prominent role. I think the recent news is there is some power sharing talks underway, and that's perhaps a good thing, but also a good time to apply this sort of pressure. And as Councillor Harris said, I think what we do in Oxford is listened to elsewhere. We saw that with giving the freedom of the city to Benny Wender, and the ripples that has had effect, and I think this is another example where we need to speak out as a city because it aligns with our values as a city of sanctuary, as a tolerant city, as a welcoming city, and so I urge everyone to support this motion. So now, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As I'm asked in the motion to write to various different bodies, mainly government offices, and indeed, as Councillor Harris has also asked me if I would potentially pass on the contents of this motion, assuming it's passed unanimously, as I trust it will be, to our twin cities, I thought it was appropriate to just say a few words. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone in the Chamber for their support behind this motion, and in particular Councillor Aziz for bringing it to us today. I've been very touched by the stories I've heard from the Sudanese community in Oxford, and you just can't imagine what it must be like for people living here and hearing these terrible stories about friends and relatives back home in Sudan. I can only imagine, but anything we can do as a city to support people in that situation, I think we should be doing, and that involves working with all those that we possibly can do, our MPs, our government, and other governments through the auspices of working with our twin cities. I think all of that is important work that we can do to try and help people who are citizens in our city that are experiencing a time of tremendous trouble, and we're also, of course, supporting those who are fighting for democracy in Sudan.
Thank you. Do we have another speaker at all before Councillor Aziz sums up? Yeah, Councillor Asher.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Shyster, for presenting this motion. I also had the opportunity to speak at the local peaceful protest and stand in solidarity against the cruel injustices such as the sexual rape, the open firing, violence, looting properties in their villages, against the injustices. I fully support this motion, and I hope all our honourable councillors do too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Aziz, you'd like to... so Councillor Lloyd Chogbason, you'd like to say something? I did say two speakers, but you put your hand up very quickly.
I'll keep it quite brief. I do want to say thank you to Captain Aziz for bringing this forward. I think it's just good to see that the whole of this chamber actually is in full support of this, because I think it will send a strong message, one to our government, and also, to the Sudanese community here in Oxford, that this council actually stands in solidarity with them during this difficult time. But one thing what we need to remember, though, is that as a group and collectively, we can't have an influence. You said earlier about Wendy's issue and how what we did kind of had an influence. I hope what we're doing here tonight does have an influence, and I hope the message reverberates right across, to the Sudanese government, to actually say that what they're doing is intolerable and unacceptable, and things need to change. Thank you.
Councillor Aziz, would you like to sum up?
Yes, thank you very much. So just to echo everything that's been said, and also to thank Councillor Harris, I hope this motion will pass with everyone's backing. And once again this evening we're reminded that the local, the regional and the international is all connected. Our world is very small, and we have a duty of care to every person, not just the people in the vicinity of the city we live in, but everywhere else. And I think this motion is about showing unity and bringing people together as well. And I'd also just like to end by once again thanking, in particular, Annalisa Dodds for her exceptional work that she's been doing on this issue, and also Leila Moran MP. They've been leading the way on this, and their work and their vocal support has really given a lot of confidence to the community, and people have asked me to share that here as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're now moving to a vote. Motion 21A, emergency motion on Sudan. Those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. I think we can all be proud as a council that we've unanimously passed that motion. Thank you very much. We're now moving on to motion 21B, City of Sanctuary, and that's proposed by Councillor Jafari Marbini. And do we have a seconder? I think Councillor Wolf. Okay, thank you. Would you like to propose a motion?
Lord Mayor, councillors and citizens, as some of you know, my father is a refugee. We moved here from Tehran when I was 13. It is therefore a great honour to propose this motion to a council that has made strides in this area with the Syrian resettlement scheme and through broader work with our numerous partners. I particularly want to thank Councillor Tidball and our officers for their work. We have a city with tireless campaigners, civil society groups and charities working together with a simple message: you are not alone. I am hugely proud of groups such as the Syrian Sisters and African Families in the UK, run by those with lived experiences, to allow a safe space where one can feel at home. Despite all this, there are huge challenges to overcome to ensure our friends, our neighbours have access to rights and services, to tackle isolation, and to work towards ensuring that we are not part of the government's racist, hostile environment in any of our work. You might ask, why now? I worked in Australia in 2014, and coming back to the UK, pregnant and vulnerable, I felt frightened by the openly racist transatlantic alliance. Here in the UK, at times, a more genteel version of that same rhetoric has been used to blame immigrants for austerity and the decimation of our public services, with horrendous effects on our diverse working class in particular. I remember the Citizens of Nowhere comment. I have news for Theresa May in her last few hours as a Prime Minister, a Muslim and Irani Brit and a proud citizen of Oxford. When we were little in Iran, there were many discussions at the seemingly never-ending Mehmooni's, that's get-togethers, on the topics of democracy, equality and social justice. When talking about the great democracies, my dad used to say in Inglis, it's not about the individuals, it's about the system. The racist rhetoric, as painful as it is for so many of us who experienced similar long before Brexit was even a word, is so much less powerful without the legitimacy given to it by our social and political structures. The fear of the other has long been used by the powerful and via them by our democratic systems, be it the Commonwealth Immigration Act of 1962 or the counter-terrorism strategy introduced in 2003, which embedded the PREVENT programme and a racist suspicion of Muslims into the safeguarding function of our public services. I am proud to see Councillor Smith starting this process of changing our systems to make sure that fear of deportation doesn't lead to destitution. I have seen firsthand, as a doctor and as a visitor to Campsfield House, not only how ineffective this is, but also how it fundamentally transforms and erodes the precious nature of our public services and our NHS. Please support this motion.
So I have Councillor Wolfe and Councillor Garden wanted to speak on this. Councillor Wolfe, do you want to?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Prime Minister, who is about to step down from her role, spent a number of years going to work every morning, trying to work out how to make life more miserable and dangerous for the most vulnerable people on the planet. And it's something which I find it very hard that I will ever forgive her for. And it was set in place by her predecessor, that nice Mr. Cameron. I watched the hostile environment working its way through with one of my church members when I was a church pastor. And I watched as a man with 2 grandchildren born in this country was driven into destitution until he was sleeping in garages. And we followed him through 2 brutal court cases, and then the Home Office spinning out the final thing after he was given right to remain. They dragged it out for another 6 months with no means of support. It's no surprise that when I retired, I started to work for Asylum Welcome. That is the Hostile Environment Working Party, and it's really important that Oxford sets up, it's like the diametric opposite to the hostile environment, and that's, to me, what City of Sanctuary means, the very opposite of a hostile environment. So enough has been said. You can tell. I would perhaps just point people to seeing the former Green Lord Mayor of Sheffield, now MEP Majid, addressing the European Parliament on this very issue as he called out Matteo Salvini for his cowardice, as an example of where the Green Party might be standing on this.
Thank you very much. So I have Councillor Garden, Councillor Tidball, and then Councillor Lloyd Shogbason. And yeah, okay, I've got the down as well. Councillor Garden.
I too am proud to support this motion to declare Oxford a city of sanctuary. Oxford has a long and very proud history of diversity of both people and ideas. It is important that we all stand in solidarity and welcome everyone, whether born here or elsewhere. The other is harmful and damaging. No one chooses the land that they were born into. No child chooses to be a victim of poverty, hate, or war. Britain once welcomed Lord Dubs as a member of the Kindertransport. His amendment reminds me of a long and proud tradition of caring for child refugees. We should maintain that. People don't lightly become refugees, so it is right and just that we help those who have taken refuge with us, to empower and enable them rather than detain them indefinitely. This motion therefore seeks to counter the growth in xenophobia and nationalism that has become even more prevalent since the Brexit referendum. You should have the full support of this Council.
Thank you. I have another 5 speakers, so I think I'll draw a line under that. Councillor Tidball.
I'd like to start by thanking our speakers and Councillor Dafari Mabini for her eloquent and their eloquent speeches earlier today. The hostile environment created by the Conservative government's discriminatory policies make it imperative, as we do in this motion, to restate our commitment to Oxford being a city of sanctuary to migrants, refugees and asylum seekers. In these times where the brutal impact of the government's regime is being laid bare, the migrant communities in our city must know that our arms are open in welcome to them and that we celebrate the vibrancy, skills and talents they bring to our city and communities. We became a city of sanctuary in 2015, and as Cabinet Member for Supporting Communities, I wanted to say something of the proud and proactive record we have put in place since then. Oxford City Council has accommodated 136 people under our VPRS scheme, more than any local authority in the South East. This equates to 30 families, 13 members of whom are now in full or part-time employment, 18 of whom are in volunteer roles, and 53, including children, are in English language or full-time education. We've worked closely in partnership with organisations and agencies across the city and county to share best practice and communication across Oxfordshire. This has led to improvements in raising safeguard concerns, establishing employment and ESOL pathways, and raising awareness of the EU residents post-Brexit and EU settlement support scheme hosted by Asylum Welcome. We also commission a number of services to support refugee families on resettlement programmes, including Asylum Welcome and Refugee Resource. Our dedication to this work has also led us to secure £1 million in additional funding from government to do a number of important projects, including providing extra resources to investigate and take action against rogue landlords who let out unsafe and illegal properties, and are currently developing a school advocacy project to help migrant parents be more involved and have better understanding of the UK school system. This record shows that we take our status as a city of sanctuary seriously and are a council of actions and not words. Nevertheless, there is always more work to be done, and this motion sets out a powerful roadmap to ensure our dedication to supporting the rights of asylum seekers, refugees and migrants, and enabling them to access the services they need and opportunities they deserve across our city continues in the ways so eloquently described earlier by Adam and Nabila. I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Lloyd-Shawbaser.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think it's just so heartwarming as well to see that there's a cross-party support for this. Also, I'm not a refugee, but actually, you can tell I'm a foreigner. But I was lucky to be able to come to this country at the time where I felt that people actually were being welcomed with open arms. And when I got here, actually, I felt that people actually appreciated me and valued me for whatever little bit I could contribute, to this community. But it's just so sad that recently, for whatever reason that people had, you kind of have what you call a hostile society and a hostile community. And that pains me deeply. And even at this particular point where I should be celebrating with joy that my daughter is giving birth to twins, I'm fearful. I'm fearful what might happen for them with the future ahead of them. I'm really scared. Because what I had before was actually confidence and comfort in the society that I've come to. What I have now is fear of what the future might bring and what the future might be for my children and grandchildren. And that's why I'm so pleased that people in this chamber are actually in fully support of making Oxford an anti-racist society. But I think we should actually go much further, because I think the work we need to do is not just in our own little community. I think it's become a national and a global problem. If you have someone like Donald Trump, with his rhetoric and his racist remarks, being condoned by some people, because of our own government here could not find a way to say what he said wasn't acceptable. I think when we have this kind of climate and this kind of environment, we should be fearful. So which is where within our own ranks, we should try and do whatever it is we can to push this idea of hatred and bigotry as far away as we can. Because if we don't do it now, it's our children and our grandchildren that will suffer. So every effort we make here today, please bear it in mind that we're not just doing it for us now, we're doing it for those coming behind us, and we're doing it for the future. Thank you.
Councillor Hayes.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. It won't surprise anybody that I want to support this motion. It's important to have this visibility with the flying of the flag. It's important to have this good, important set of proposals and policies. It's important to recommit as a city to what we've already done. And that's particularly important because we know what's coming. We know how bad things have been and we know how much worse it's going to get. And I don't say this in any way to rub your faces in it, but I have had the undiluted pleasure of being in meetings with Boris Johnson and Priti Patel when I used to work at an international development agency that I won't name for reasons that will become apparent. And sitting in those meetings and hearing their understanding of the refugee crisis was devastating. These are people who are so ill-equipped to actually tackle the crisis that we face, and yet Boris will likely become the Prime Minister, previously Foreign Secretary. Priti Patel will likely become the Home Secretary, having previously been the Defence Secretary. And when we left the meeting with Boris Johnson, I was with a plain-spoken Yorkshire woman who I'd made the joke that Boris was like an inverted pyramid of piffle, and she responded, no, he was a right knob. And I think that potentially gets us to a place where we're in great difficulty. It's important that we do recommit to these policies because the world is speeding up, but the world is also fragmenting. We've got huge demographic, technological, climate and other changes that are happening, which are going to make the refugee crisis even greater. We have a norms and rules-based international system that is flailing. And so it's important that there are cities like Oxford which stand up and say these things. But I think we also need to become more radical. It's not just that we have these policies, it's that we also think about those child refugees in our country who are separated from their families. We should be asking the government in future motions to help bring families together. The new Home Secretary could, with the stroke of a pen, repeal and end the restrictive rules that keep refugees in the UK apart from the people they love. And there are three things that could happen which would stop that. The first is to allow child refugees in the UK the right to sponsor their close family so they can rebuild their lives and help them integrate into a new community here. The second is that we expand who qualifies as a family so that young people, young refugees who have turned 18 and elderly parents can join their families in the UK. And we should reintroduce legal aid across the board, but for refugee family reunion cases, because we know that when you strip away legal aid, you cause those with the least amount of money to suffer the greatest, and refugees already suffer pretty damn badly. So we've seen no progress rather under Theresa May, who as Home Secretary had restrictive immigration policies. We're going to see even less progress under Boris Johnson, who as Foreign Secretary simply did not understand the issue. Families belong together. The government must help bring families back together. It must listen to our voice, and it must treat refugees like the human beings that they are.
Thank you. I have perhaps been too generous in allowing lots of speakers, so if you could be brief. The remaining speakers I have are Councillor Belly-Summers and Councillor Turner, and then Councillor Drifari Marbini to sum up.
I commend this cross-party motion. Working in the field of psychological therapy, I'm well aware of the traumatic impact and the detrimental effect on the mental health being a refugee or a migrant or an asylum seeker can have. So support our refugees and support this motion.
Thank you. Heartfelt and admirably brief. So, Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. There are three concrete sort of things I wanted to say on this. One is specifically around some of the enforcement activities we do. When I, as part of a decade ago now, was the lead member in relation to HMO licensing, we gave a clear steer that we didn't want any immigration officer attendants that visited the properties that we were doing, and that's been a policy which has been, I think, uninterrupted in existence for the best part of a decade. There are other councils that were sort of trailblazing on this that took a different view. But the view that we took, and I feel really strongly it was the right one, was that particularly where people's immigration status is uncertain, they're really, really vulnerable to exploitation, and our job as a council ought to be protecting people from exploitation. It's already enough of a struggle to persuade people that they need to be able to enforce their rights, that they need to be able to inform the council when a landlord is not meeting his or her obligations. And the idea that then the council is in some way the long arm of the Home Office would be very, very distressing, and I think would undermine all of the work that we would do here. And just as an aside as well, I'm extremely concerned about the right to rent checks, and I hope that they come to an end very soon as well. Secondly, again, best part of a decade ago, I worked in an MP's office. At the time, the Home Office was in a mess. It's obviously got worse since. And the MP's immigration inquiry line was one of the few ways that you could actually help. And there were times when we uncovered people's stories where papers had gone missing, things hadn't been dealt with, people had been unfairly treated. And that was having a really awful impact, and that clearly is the case in spades now. And again, if there's any sense that in approaching your Member of Parliament, you'll in some way undermine your position rather than get the support and the justice that you need. That's a very, very dangerous situation. And so that really brings me on to the third thing, which is I hope that we will be able to do quite a lot of publicity firsthand, and also work with groups who will speak with people whose status may be uncertain. And let's see if we can really get the word out there, because inevitably that sort of mistrust, that concern about what might happen if you speak with people in positions of authority will still be there, and I hope that gradually we'll be able to shift the perception of this council and this city so that we are a safe place to come for support, and so that's what I hope to do.
Thank you very much. And if anyone's in any doubt that the hostile environment still exists, two of our guests to the Freedom of the City event were held up for 7 hours in immigration from Papua New Guinea, and only concerted effort by a number of people got them through at all. So, so would you like to sum up?
Thank you, councillors, and thank you particularly Councillor Turner for those words of concrete action. So I talked about feeling fearful, but now hearing those wonderful congresswomen standing up to Trump's rhetoric, I feel rejuvenated, knowing that if there is no struggle, there is no progress. We desperately need a new story and a new vision. We must unite and return to the basic values of justice, human rights, and dignity for all. We each matter by the virtue of our shared humanity. As Ilhan Omar put it, we must see others' struggles as our own, and their success as our success, so we can speak to our common humanity. Thank you.
We had a very great debate on this, and we have motion 21B now for vote. City Sanctuary, those in favour, please raise their hands. Okay, thank you very much. We're very proud of passing that. So we're moving swiftly on to motion 21C, making Oxford an anti-racist city, and I'm hoping we can deal with this relatively quickly.
Yes.
Councillor Aziz.
Yes, thank you very much. So as we've seen, there's a theme this evening in these motions, and I think that's great that this theme is running through the council motions. So you've got the motion in front of you, so I'm just going to go through it very briefly. This is about making Oxford an anti-racist city. This is due to the increase in racism and hate crime, which has been reported across the country, including here in Oxford, and this includes a rise in far-right Nazi groups in Britain. The UN has condemned this country's treatment of refugees, of the disabled, of the homeless, and has condemned this country in relation to racism as well. And this motion is focusing not only on the day-to-day racism that people face, but also on structural racism, because in this country, as in other countries, there sadly is an attempt to suggest that racism is anecdotal. It's about something that happens to one person or one community. And this states very clearly that this is about structural bigotry and racism. And we've already heard this evening about refugees and the hostile environment. This motion makes reference to the Windrush generation who continue to be failed by this disgraceful government. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is on the rise. It's being mainstreamed through our political and public discourse. We've already heard about that this evening. One thing I do want to flag up is the increase in incidents in Oxford. In 2018, there were 188 racist or racially aggravated crimes reported to the police, an increase of 40% compared to 2017. So the motion is calling on the council to look at prevent the government's counter-terrorism strategy. We would like this to be suspended while officials conduct a comprehensive audit of its impact on racial equality. We want to urge action on making Oxford a truly anti-racist city, and this means developing a long-term strategy to put into action anti-racism work, and this should be done alongside the City of Sanctuary work, because this work needs to be done in a collective for it to be as powerful and for it to be embedded. So the final 4 points, this council therefore pledges to make Oxford an anti-racist city. We'll work with and listen to people experiencing racism, and we'll work with local authorities, trade unions and community groups to achieve this, and ask the leader of the council to write to the Home Office seeking the suspension of the Prevent programme. And I'd also like to thank people in the public gallery as well who've supported this work, and everyone in this city who is 100% committed to ensuring that this is a city where everyone can thrive. We've already heard continuously through this evening about the context that we're living in, and we cannot and must not be complacent. We are facing a grave situation, and people are frightened, and we need to stand up for them. Thank you.
Thank you. So looking for a seconder for this, Councillor Rowley. So would you like to speak?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And thank you, Shyster, because this is an important motion. These cities shall be a refuge, both for the children of Israel and for the stranger, and for the sojourner among them. Dick and the city rector will recognise Numbers chapter 35. And indeed, our city has been a refuge for many, a diverse and vibrant place where people from many different backgrounds live and work together. But that doesn't mean we can sit back and be happy and complacent with the situation, as recent racist incidents in Oxford have shown. I've no wish to turn this evening into a history lecture, but round here in Oxford we see, more than in most places, the history of tolerance and intolerance and how they have conflicted for many, many years in this country. The place where we're standing now was, centuries ago, the heart of Oxford's Jewish community, a community which was expelled from England by royal order, their property confiscated, their members turned into refugees. And yet, in the Bodleian Library is a beautiful bilingual manuscript, which was a joint work of the scholars of the university and the rabbis who ministered in this place. Near here is Rhodes House, named after one of the most despicable of all imperialist profiteers, and still named after him despite many student protests. And yet, Gandhi spoke at Balliol, and Mandela spoke in this place, and 5 days ago we gave the freedom of the city to Benny Wender. So the tradition we look to in Oxford is one not of complacency but of struggle for our common humanity. And this motion is part of what our council can do as our generation's part of that struggle. Please do support it.
I have a number of people. I saw Councillor Ashad first, and then I'll make the note. Keep your hands up while I make notes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for presenting this motion. As a result of recent terrorist attacks and widespread immigration to the West, there has also been a dangerous rise in the nationalism in the Western countries. Evoking fears of the dark days of the past, it is particularly disturbing that the far-right groups have become increasingly vocal and have seen their membership rise and have even made political gains. They too are extremists who seek to poison Western society by inciting the masses against those who have a different colour of skin or hold different beliefs. In addition, the rhetoric of certain powerful world leaders has become increasingly nationalistic and belligerent, their own citizens above all. I do not dispute the fact that it is the responsibility of the governments and the leaders to look after their own people and to protect their interests. Certainly, as long as the leaders act with justice and do not infringe upon the rights of others, attempts to better the lives of the citizens is a great virtue. However, policies that are based upon selfishness, greed, and readiness to forfeit the rights of others are wrong and a means of sowing discord and division in the world. Therefore, we must stand up against those who seek to divide us. As to any support we provide must be reflected in our education and training, as by doing so we will be helping safeguard the future of our world. We know that recent data published in the Home Office on hate crime in England and Wales in the previous year, for which for the first time issued data on the perceived religious identity of hate crime victims, show that over half, 52%, religious hate crime are Muslims. The data also notes the higher propensity of British Muslims to be victims of racially motivated hate crime. Discrimination, bigotry, hate, exclusion and hostility has no place in modern society. A zero-tolerance policy must exist for racism. Honourable Councillors, I hope you support this motion in pledge to make Oxford an anti-racist city. Thank you.
Thank you. I've drawn the line. I've got 6 more people wanting to speak, and I've drawn the line at Councillor Garden, Henwood, Rush, Taylor, Azad and Wolfe, and I'll draw the line there. Councillor Garden.
Shyster, I welcome this motion. I can't fault any of your points. I do have a slight problem with the conclusion and the belief that section. Because in your points, it comes across that the increase in racism has all occurred after the 2016 referendum. The PREVENT programme was, of course, introduced in 2003 by the Labour government, and there's been various guises of this strategy, and it forms a part of 4 points within that. So I find it curious that Brexit doesn't come up here, because I don't think that actually just suspending Operation PREVENT is going to solve this problem. I think there's a much bigger problem, both socially and economically, that will carry on affecting the increase that we are finding in our community. And I think it needs to be addressed as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's worth saying that we're really, that the actions that Council are doing are the final 4 points, although obviously the tech context is important. Councillor Henwood.
I'll be brief, Lord Mayor. Thank you for bringing this motion forward. I really do welcome this. As a teacher in a secondary school, I have to go through the process of PREVENT every year. The stereotyping does not bode well. Many teachers have complained about it and do not want to take the training on. However, due to contractual commitments, we have to. So this opportunity to suspend it, I really do welcome, and I thank you.
Councillor Rush.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd also really like to thank Shyster for bringing this motion, and also for her tireless anti-racist work. I think we can be really proud to have her in our ranks as a councillor, and I'm really glad that we were able to give an ovation after she was traduced so unfairly earlier in the session, so that's really good. And I wasn't really going to mention Prevent, actually, but since it's come up, I think that it is a really important part of the motion, because I've seen how Prevent can really kind of clamp down on the ability of the Muslim communities in the city and in the country to participate fully in political life. It basically acts as a surveillance system, and rightly so. It was brought in under the Labour government during the War on Terror years, and I think it is something that we must renounce. We have to really make an intervention in the debate, because it's up for review now, and we need to make sure as a council we call for it to be suspended and to be scrapped, and that Muslims in this country are given their full civil liberties, and there's no infringement whatsoever. And that is an example of what Shaista was alluding to, of structural racism and structural Islamophobia that we must challenge. So I'm proud of Shaista, but I'm also proud that we must be one of the only local authorities in the country that has adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and the APPG definition on Islamophobia. We've just declared ourselves a sanctuary city, and I hope we're now just about to declare ourselves an anti-racist city. I think we must be one of the only cities that has done that. It's a really, really robust set of ambitious pronouncements, and it sets the bar high, as it should, and it's really necessary. As has been alluded to, we have a racist occupying the highest office in the world, and we're about to get one in Downing Street. It's hard to fight hate crime when it's being announced from such pulpits. And in the next recession or the no-deal fallout, which may come, I think as Councillor Hayes really said, we need to really build the resilience of our city and our institutions to cope with the surge of hate crime that follows those events, because we know where the blame for a recession, we know the blame for Brexit collapsing will be pinned. It won't be pinned on the ruling class, it won't be pinned on the capitalist class, it will be pinned on migrants and Muslims. So we need to be ready, resilient and prepared in this council and in this city, and we can also be proactive as well in dismantling existing structural racisms. So that's why I hope that this motion, much like the climate emergency that we passed earlier in the year, will be used as a sort of frame for the council's work, that it will act as a bit of a lens through which we view our actions, and it has real material outcomes. We do, as a council, have limited political, economic, moral capital, and I really hope that we put that to work in building the anti-racist city. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor. Yeah, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Shaista for proposing this motion, and to Mike for a truly memorable seconding, which I can't even begin to replicate. I've got real personal concerns about the rise of racism over the past couple of years. And as a Labour Party member, I will sit here in this chamber and I will tell everybody I am deeply ashamed that the party I've been a member of for over 30 years is being investigated by the IHRA. Sorry, I've got that wrong, haven't I? The EHRC, sorry, too many initials. I think this is such an important move for us as a city, that we are taking ownership of racism, we are taking ownership of what's happening locally. I've had anecdotes from comrades around things that have happened to their family members in the city, and we have to do something about this. It is so important. Like David Henwood, I've completed the Prevent training at work. I work in health, and I felt very uneasy and actually quite dirty. I felt like I was being used as an agent of the state, and it wasn't comfortable. So I'm very pleased that that's being reviewed. So please support this motion.
Thank you. I'm hoping with the last two speakers can be brief. We can move to a vote and get another motion through. Councillor Azad.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I wanted to support this motion and thank you, Councillor Shaista Aziz, to bring into this council. But I believe in actions. We've been saying it for years and years to do something about racism. The report says working with police to promote reporting through their hidden arm and campaign, and including hate crime and page on the including a hate crime or page on Council's website. Action plan is available on Oxford City Council website. How many older people knew about this website? How many second language speakers know about this website? They can't go on computers and hardly speak English, as we heard before, and illiterate in their own language. These incidents are happening to foreign nationals and migrant and elderly people. I can give you an example of an elderly couple, 81 years old, 84 years old, educated up to PhD degree, and had been living in UK last 50 years, and had professional jobs, are experiencing racism for last 5 years. They have reported it to police, recorded it in their diaries, has been given UR numbers by police, but no action has been taken. Asylum seekers are scared to go to police, and as a community member, we've been told Oxford is a safe city. When some attacks, which are reported 4.8% of Muslims, another woman described how she was attacked by 20 years old and targeted because of her ethnicity and religious clothing. And police closed their investigation into incident after CCTV footage of the incident was inadequate and no action was taken. I would urge the Oxford City Council to bring back organizations or Equality Council in Oxford so people are free to report these incidents. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wolf, I'll ask you to be brief.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I need no persuading to support an anti-racism statement, and I agree with the analysis in here. There's one specific thing that I'm being asked to support, and that is concerning the PREVENT programme, and there I have a problem, because I'm ignorant. I don't know enough about it. Thank you very much to Councillor Henwood and Taylor for mentioning it, but my understanding of the PREVENT programme, I did a bit of training 3-4 years ago in that, but I think it's changed since, is that it's meant to be an anti-radicalisation thing. Now, I'm fairly convinced that the white supremacist right is organising and is grooming young people, and it seems to me that there need to be programs in place to identify that and to deal with that. That needs to be part of an anti-racism strategy. Now, I have really, to be honest, no idea whether the PREVENT programme is able to do that. Frankly, anything set up by this government I would be deeply suspicious of, but so far I have no information which encourages me to say we should suspend the PREVENT programme. I've no doubt that it has negative effects, but it may be one of the strategies to deal with the organising hard right, which we know is organising very effectively on the web and elsewhere, and possibly in schools. So I'm afraid I'm going to abstain on this, but it's not because I'm opposed to an anti-racism thing, it's because the one specific thing it's asking me to support is something that I do not know enough about, and I don't want to be suggesting that we close down something which may be a tool in tackling the hard right.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Aziz, if you'd like to sum up.
Okay, so first of all, thank you everybody for your contributions, which I found very humbling, and yeah, it's really important that these discussions are taking place in this chamber. Racism is something that people find uncomfortable to talk about, but it's much more uncomfortable to actually be a victim of racism. There is no hierarchy of racism. Sean, thank you very much for raising the point about the current state of the Labour Party. We cannot get away from the fact that many of our Jewish brothers and sisters do not feel safe in the Labour Party. This needs to be acknowledged, so thank you for doing that. There is no hierarchy of racism. To dehumanise one of us is to dehumanise all of us. And we are currently in a situation where people are being pitted up against each other and told to fight it amongst themselves and to basically take the crumbs that are on offer. And what this motion is doing is actually stating very clearly that we recognise the connection with the systemic racism, with day-to-day racism, with racism inside government policy, for example, is laying it out very, very clearly. And And you very rightly mentioned Brexit. I've never shied away from talking about Brexit. My colleagues can vouch for that. What Brexit has done is open up a massive can of worms, which has legitimized racism in ways that we have not seen in decades. I just want to finish up on this point. My late father came here aged 16 as a migrant. He came to this country, and one of my most vivid memories of racism in this city, not very far from here, near Hinckley Park, was when the National Front came to this city and they threatened to burn down the houses of anyone who was not white. And I was told I had to stay off school by my mum and my dad and my uncles. We were terrified. And it was the good people of this city who marched these racist Nazis out of this city. And this city has got a proud reputation, as Mike pointed out very eloquently, of standing up against hate and standing for what is good. And this is what this motion is about. Final thing on Prevent, I would like us not to focus the entire motion on Prevent. Prevent is an element of this. Prevent is under scrutiny by the government. I, like you, do not trust anything this government says or does, but nonetheless is under scrutiny, and it's also under scrutiny by the Labour Party, and there are reasons for that. And I'd also like to thank both my colleagues here for speaking eloquently about what they felt when they were asked to go through the Prevent programme, because your white privilege allows you to say that. If I say that, suspicion is put on my shoulders. And that's why this Prevent programme does need to go, but it's not the only element of this anti-racism motion. And I think it's exceptional that this council has debated all the issues it has this evening, and I think we should be proud of the fact that we're doing this, and I do hope that other cities will take on board our motions as well. So thank you very much.
I'm going to move rapidly to a vote. So we're voting on motion 21C. Those in favour, please show their hands. Okay, those against? And abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. 5 minutes left. I'm hoping we can move rapidly on to motion D and just have a proposer and seconder. Motion's proposed by Councillor Goddard.
Thanks very much, my Lord Mayor. Councillor Rowley in the previous debate threatened us with, and then withdrew his threat, of a history lecture. I'm afraid I have to start this with what's going to sound a little bit like a lecture, for which I give apologies, but then I am a lecturer. Colleagues, natural capital is a term often used to describe those parts of nature that provide important benefits to people. Some of them are tangible: cities, trees that clean our air, vegetation in upstream catchments that is critical in terms of water flow regulation and preventing downstream flooding in cities like our own. Others are less obvious, but equally vital: the green spaces, the trees, the flowers that are proven to underpin essential benefits to mental and physical health. Key principle of the government's 25-year environment plan is to leave our natural environment in a better state than it is at present, so that it's able to provide those benefits now and for future generations. Now, to do that, we need to conserve and enhance our nature in cities and around them. In the words of the chair of the government's Natural Capital Committee, Professor Dieter Helm, we can be green and prosperous, but it won't happen by default. Measuring our natural capital assets is clearly key to monitoring the rate of success or otherwise in conserving and enhancing them. The committee's 6th annual report, which was published earlier this year, makes clear the limitations of the current situation. Lots of environmental data is often collected by different government agencies, universities, NGOs, but in different ways, in different places, at different times, using different metrics. As the annual report puts it, the absence of data on the state of natural capital is worrying. The report proposes an environmental census should be undertaken within the next year, centrally coordinated but delivered in a way which is as inclusive as possible. The purpose is to provide a baseline on the state of our environment currently, against which progress can be measured. Now, the good sense of collecting data in that sort of way is unanswerable. The science is also clearly well evidenced and robust, but there's another huge advantage to the proposal in this motion, and that's the opportunity for large-scale public engagement. This is, in effect, citizen science, designed to include every school in our city, as well as many other organisations and individuals. What better way to capture the passion and commitment of young people in particular? And as you'll remember, colleagues, we had excellent evidence from Rakia Wayne earlier this evening, if it were needed, of how engaged our young people are with this kind of issue. What better a way of capturing that than to ensure that they have a voice and a stake in the future of our city and our planet? Environment-focused citizen science is something a lot of people, whether you know it or not, will be familiar with. Colleagues very well may have heard of the RSPB's Big Garden Birdwatch, the current Big Butterfly Count, and I have to admit I can confirm from personal experience just how obsessed it's possible to get with doing weekly surveys of the birds in your own back garden. So this motion asks this council to stick its head above the parapet. We'll do this, we'll do it first, we'll take the lead, we'll run a pilot. We'll need to coordinate with neighbouring authorities and others, and this motion commits to that as well. Council, this will be exciting, it'll be fun, it'll be popular, and it will be vitally important. I ask members in all parts of our city, would you welcome going into primary, secondary schools in your wards, inviting the children there to take part in measuring the natural environment in their communities? I hope you would. In fact, I know you would. I commend the motion to council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard. We just have time for a seconder and one speaker if they're brief. Councillor Landor-Mills, you're down a seconder.
Thank you. The motion asks Oxford City Council to act as the lead in the proposed natural capital census in our region, to offer to conduct a pilot in advance of the main census and to open discussion with neighbouring authorities about how best to coordinate action at a regional level. I ask you as local councillors and as global citizens to support this motion. The reason that this is worthy of your support are twofold. Firstly, it helps to know that we have what we have and what needs conserving and enhancing. Secondly, because of the importance of net gain and the need for us to have ownership as to how it is defined. Net gain is a big deal. Net gain is, maybe, the slow train that can do the heavy lifting to turn around the existential environmental crisis we're faced with. We need more places for wildlife and habitat. We need carbon sinks. We need places where children can play and where we can connect with nature and recharging ourselves. Net gain would also be the ruse, the greenwash, the false profit that allows the weak and the innocent and the dull to be led by greedy and wicked developers further down the path of environmental destruction. As part of the coming environmental bill, net environmental gain will be enshrined in law. Net gain is most commonly understood as net biodiversity gain, and that is, of course, vital. However, an area of land, as well as providing a home for wildlife, may also act as a carbon sink, and where greenhouse gases are removed from the atmosphere, a place of natural beauty, somewhere for sport, recreation and natural play, land for water storage and purification. Viewed collectively, this natural capital forms environmental capital. Once the Environment Bill is enacted, development will need to provide net environmental gain. Developers and planners will need to understand what natural capital we have and what natural capital we need. How we measure natural capital will be central to defining whether something does or doesn't provide net gain. The metrics will need to be robust and transparent, and also trickily capture difficult things such as beauty and well-being. Our involvement in the natural capital census offers us a chance to deal with new transport, housing and business while meeting our commitments to a sustainable future, and arm us that there are no naked emperors or digital blindness, and the detailed delicacy and loveliness of our immediate natural world are enhanced and protected.
Councillor, can I ask you to stop there? So I'm just going to ask for Councillor's indulgence to extend. We've got 2 minutes left to extend to the hour for 5 minutes, and then we've got Councillor Hollingsworth wishing to speak, and then I'm suggesting we go for a summing up. Okay? Councillor Hollingsworth, thank you for
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for your generosity in allowing me to speak. I'd like to speak in support of this motion. I do note, unfortunately, that the government has rejected, or rather disregarded, the recommendation. If you look at their response on the 16th of May, they've sidestepped the suggested census. However, the rest of the motion seems something that we would, I hope, want to get involved with. I'm the City Council's representative on the Oxfordshire 2050 subgroup of the Growth Board, or whatever its official title is. And clearly the evidence base there from something like this is just as critical as the evidence base that Dick was asking me about with our own local plan. The Local Economic Partnership has made a great thing of its Living Labs concept, and the County Council and the Local Economic Partnership have done a number of things which are essentially citizen science and the Living Labs option there. And frankly, I probably find this a more useful use of that process than, say, autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are fun and exciting, though they apparently are. So I think in summary, this is an issue where the outcomes are important, but the process is perhaps even more important, because there is a clear cognitive dissonance sometimes between what people say and what people do. And you can see that. Everyone is enthusiastic when it comes to saying there's a climate emergency and we must do something. But you need to be thoughtful about what that something is. That dissonance was best exemplified to me by people who voted enthusiastically for a climate emergency motion a couple of meetings ago, and within minutes waylaid me and argued vociferously for more car parking and more roads. And I think that's the challenge. It's to get that understanding, and that's what the Citizens Panel is all about. And I think this is exactly what Councillor Goddard's motion is all about, and I very much commend him for putting such a long and learned thing together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. And Councillor Goddard, if you were to forego your summing up, you've become very popular.
My Lord Mayor, what a splendid debate.
Okay. So we'll move to a vote on motion 21D, Natural Capital Census. Those in favour, please show. Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a good note to end on. And thank you for bearing with me on my first council meeting. Thank you. And I've been told to say normal IT services will be resumed as soon as possible. Oh, no, they are actually resumed, so there we are. So, and everyone who is having a break between now and the next council meeting, do have a good one. Thank you.